dove into user experience and the voice companies use and how they personify their corporate values in marketing and sales. We dove into how that voice can be used or abused by companies, how it's seen by customers, how it can be leveraged in crisis comms, with cancel culture, and much more. Please enjoy this conversation with David Ewing.
So with that, tell me about your childhood. I mean, why not? Let's do it.
All right. Well,
no, I know. I mean, you don't have to tell me about like when you're like 3 years old. I'm just like, let's get in your background.
So I've been an entrepreneur my whole life. And I think the easiest place to start that question is with my parents, who were both entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. And my earliest memories are of things that I think other kids don't deal with. Like the 1981 oil crash was a really big problem because we had just patented this aluminum sucker rod, and my dad had spent everything buying this equipment so that he could start mass producing these things. Then the oil crash happened and no one was interested in exploration. And so I can just remember that Thanksgiving with my parents just sitting there quietly, like almost hearing the clock tick as we're just like, what are we going to do? And so I've grown up as an entrepreneur in an entrepreneur family.
And that made you want to do it?
Well, yes, because what happened was my parents also just really took the stress off to be like, look, we could live in a cardboard box for a couple of years and then we'll bounce back. And what also happened is I did get to see the bounce backs. So my mother was an entrepreneur too. And one time her office flooded and all of her documents, I mean, it was paper documents in the late 80s, and she lost all of her IP and had to rebuild the whole thing over again. But she did. And then, she had a great exit and it was terrific. And my dad eventually sold that company to IBM and that was terrific. And so boom, bust, it happened over and over again. And so also as a child, I had what you might call a laissez-faire childhood. Like there weren't any rules and it was very entrepreneurial. So one of the things I remember the most is there was this forest behind my house. And to my 7-year-old brain, that forest was infinite. It just kept going. And so I would spend my time daring to see how far I would go, And as the years progressed and I got a little bit older, I kept going until one day I did manage to go the full 2 miles and find out that, it ends at the county road. And
but that was, I go past all the time.
Yeah, there it is, But for 2 years, it was, always an adventure to dare and see how far you could go. So that was how I was brought up. And so that laissez-faire childhood was a lot of fun. And I think it hooked me on entrepreneurship. And so I took a job out of college and my parents were just mystified as to why I would bother to do that. But ultimately I did find my way to entrepreneurship. And so that was kind of how I got started.
And what exactly drew you to it? I mean, other than the fact that you saw it, I mean, I've done it myself, so I am fully aware of the highs and lows, but there's a lot of lows, and it's hard. It's way harder than most people say it is.
There are a lot of lows. Yes.
Yeah.
But it's almost an addiction, and I think there's also that freedom that comes with being an entrepreneur that I just was so discouraged by when I wasn't one. So I've only had 2 jobs before I was a entrepreneur. And I remember going to the partner at this firm that I was at, and it was this Silicon Valley strategy company. And I thought it was really, really cool. And it was, kind of a boutique McKinsey. And we finished a project and I went to the lead partner and I said, hey, we could take what we did here, we could package it up and we could offer it to this. And I kept going and I gave him this whole pitch. And the guy looked at me and he said, David, I just answer the phone around here. Get lost. And I was so distraught, not because he said, well, your idea's got problems, it doesn't have merits, or you haven't thought through things. Just, I don't care. I'm just waiting for the phone to ring. And when my boss was like that, it was so demoralizing that I just realized, this isn't for me. I got to be more independent.
So it was freedom.
Freedom.
You think so? Yeah, I think I have a similar sensation. I was driving along one day, and we had started a company, but I hadn't really realized what it was like to have a company. And we were driving in the middle of the day. I'm like, oh, it's the middle of the day, and I'm driving to a meeting that I have to go to, but I'm not in the office. But this is work, and I'm like, this is very strange sensation. I'm not stuck chained to a desk, like the job requires me to be out in the world and do things and interact with people. And wow, this is amazing. And if I don't do it, it's really bad. But if I don't do it, it's my fault too. So I get all the upside and all the downside.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting sensation.
You know, the first year I was an entrepreneur, I had two things happen to me that I thought were both in that same vein. I had a accountant that I really wanted to meet with to see if he would help me with my books. And he asked me what time I wanted to meet. And I just threw it out there. I said, I'll meet you anytime you want, 5 o'clock in the morning if you want. He said, you want to meet at 5 in the morning? And I said, yeah, I'll meet you at 5 in the morning. And we did. And we met at 5 a.m. I'm like, this is great. I'm getting my life started, my day started. We had a 5 a.m. meeting, which was crazy. And I don't know why he thought that would be a good idea. But I took him up on it. I took the dare, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah. And then at the same time, I remember one time getting sick in that first year and not being able to move, you know, just laying on my bed, no concentration, just fog in my brain, and realizing like this whole week is going by and nothing's happening and there's no consequences. And I thought to myself, I could do this in a regular week too. I mean, thank God I don't, but it just was the strangest, most liberating feeling in the world to realize that your time is your own and you can do what you want with it. So
For good or bad.
For good or bad. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So was that the first company, was that Motiv, or was that a previous company you started?
Well, I like to say that Motiv has actually been 7 companies because I've only had the one company over from 2001 until the present. And I have evolved it and changed it and modified it and restarted it a couple times because it was almost like I had 5 companies that didn't work and then 2 that did. And I've got the 2 that did, but they've all been under the same moniker, if you will. Mm-hmm. And in 2001, when I started this company, it was the .com nuclear winter and nothing was happening. And I remember going to a lawyer to say, hey, will you do a search for San Francisco Consulting Group? Just see if that name is available. And he said, kid, get lost. Like I don't have time to waste on this. I'm sure it's taken. And I said, just check. And sure enough, he called me back an hour later and said, I can't believe it, but 5 years and 1 month ago, KPMG bought San Francisco Consulting Group. They never renewed the naming rights. You're free and clear. Take it. And I did. So I had San Francisco Consulting Group. I still own the 4-letter domain SFCG to this day. But when I moved the company to Austin, Texas, it didn't make a lot of sense.
Right.
So
you could probably resell it.
So we rebranded it as Motiv for now. Yeah.
I bet somebody would be happy to take that off your hands.
The search for common ground is very interested. Now, if only they had some money, they could talk to me about it.
Yeah,
so.
Exactly. Interesting. Or work with somebody who's there. It's like, oh yeah, we also work in San Francisco. You never know. There's always advantages. So what was the impetus for starting the company?
Well, the true impetus for starting the company was I needed a job. I wish I had a more glorious story about some noble purpose that I wanted, but I had just finished working for my second company.
Is this on your About Us? I just needed a job, so I did this.
Well, there's the truth and then there's the legend, right? And sometimes you just have to go with the truth. But so oftentimes I print the legend. However, I had just come off this company, Aperion. And it was everything that the TV show Silicon Valley has made out a startup to be. I mean, I can't even watch that show.
I know, me neither.
It's too painful.
The first episode, I had like anxiety. I'm like, what is going on?
This is too much like real life.
Really close.
Yes. And
I could have been at that party.
Yeah. So I have avoided that, but I lived that enough to say, okay, I need to do something else. So Aperion crashed and burned in February of 2001, and I needed something. So I wanted to start a software company at that point, and I'd had all my experience was in services and strategy consulting, and I went to angel investors and unanimously got shut down, and mostly just because of timing. And so originally I started San Francisco Consulting Group with the idea that I would do that for a couple of years, and then I would start my software company when things got better. But like most things in life, I got sucked in and I loved it too much and I was all in. And once I was committed, and I found out that many years later, I found out that there are different personality types about entrepreneurs. They're not all the same. And some entrepreneurs will have 5 businesses and they kind of have their finger in 5 different pies. And I'm the opposite. I like to have one business and continue to build and build and build on it. And so it's a more of a builder mentality. And I've just kind of gotten comfortable with that's the kind of entrepreneur that I am.
Gotcha. So when you say software company, do you mean, it sounds like software consulting company. Is that what you mean? Or do you mean building software?
Originally I wanted to build a middleware company back in 2001. So I had an idea for a middleware and I thought I had a better mousetrap. And so that's what I really wanted to do. But just everything being what it was, I realized that strategy and sales and software consulting would work better. So I just started the company in that vein. So I kind of wanted to thread a difficult upright, which is ethically, I did not want to compete with the firm that had hired me out of college. I just owed them a debt of gratitude for giving me a start. So I didn't want to offer any services that could potentially take $1 away from them. So I moved away from the things that I knew to something that was a little bit more adjacent. So I moved from strategy consulting to sales and marketing consulting and started to build a practice around that. So that was how I began my original business. And
what was that? What did that company do?
San Francisco Consulting Group originally in 2001 was all about ROI-based selling for software companies. So any software company that's selling business to business, can fall into the trap of buy my stuff because it's got this feature or that function. And that's not why anyone should ever buy enterprise software. People should buy enterprise software because they understand that if they invest $1 today, it will improve their business by $2 or more next year. And salespeople have a hard time making that, articulating that argument, especially in a way that's believable and credible. So San Francisco Consulting Group originally became a return on investment selling consulting agency where we would build models for software companies and train their sales teams on how to make an effective ROI-based sell.
So was it like ROI calculators, or was it just looking at the market and seeing existing companies who've already used that software and what their efficiencies were? Or
it started out as doing case studies on the successful customers they already had, which then would turn into a financial model, which we would either deliver as something as simple as a very high-end Excel spreadsheet, or it could be more elaborate as an application. But we built that and then started offering that to all of our customers. And so most of the Silicon Valley companies that were trying to articulate and hold value and not just try to win by discounting came to us. And so we started to build a practice and a name around ROI selling.
So you changed roles at some point, right? What was the impetus for changing that role? Did you just don't want to be a CEO anymore, or?
Well, my role has always been as the chief experience or chief executive officer. So I've been the CEO, but I call it now the chief experience officer because.
Okay. So it is the same role. You just rebranded yourself.
Just rebranded it.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Interesting. But when, in 2005, we realized that we needed to deliver a little bit more, and we decided to stop just building our own kind of cobbled together bespoke applications for each individual customer. And we wanted to deliver everything in a more scalable way. So we looked at the idea of, do we build our own software at that point? But the jobless recovery was kind of where it was, and we didn't have quite the capital to really build our own software. So we partnered with Oracle in 2005. And then we started to build all of the things that we were doing on top of Oracle technology instead. And that was a lower cost way to get into the market and to begin to deliver our solutions in sales and marketing.
Okay, so I'm stuck on the chief experience officer. What exactly do you mean by that? I just want to make sure I got that before we move on.
So Motiv, which is the name that San Francisco Consulting Group became when it moved to Austin.
What was your motive?
Yes, exactly. What is the motive for the crime? Motiv is a customer experience company, which means that anybody who does business with one of our clients is going to eventually, start out as a prospect. They're going to move through the entire funnel. They're eventually going to transact with our client. Then they're going to, begin to get onboarded with whatever and the fulfillment of their service, and then support and ongoing and repeat transactions and the whole journey that they go through, right? So that is customer experience, from marketing to sales to service to more sales and marketing to referrals and so forth. And so as a customer experience company who provides the technology, the best practices, and the people to really make that happen, that's what we do. So I just took the CEO role and called it Chief Experience Officer instead of Chief Executive Officer.
Interesting. Yeah. In some ways, it might give you more credibility, actually. That's
the hope.
Well, because a lot of people think, well, if you're the CEO, you don't know anything. You're just the sales guy. But Chief Experience Officer is like, okay, well, all right, now let me walk you through my problems. I would like to make a better experience for XYZ reasons, or I'm seeing some slowdown in certain parts of my flows. I'd like to clean all that up, and I don't know how or whatever.
And I think that is deliberate. And because, at Motiv, we are always kind of innovating on our own offering. And I spend a lot of time doing that. So we do your classic visionary and integrator. I have a wonderful business partner who is the integrator in the company who runs day-to-day processes. I handle all of the innovation and our largest customers. And so that innovation and that experience is where I'm spending the majority of my time. So it is the CEO role, as it's classically defined by EOS or any number of other offerings like that. But I do that. And so that's why I gave it that title.
So out of curiosity, if you're going to say that title, how would you differ something like UI versus UX? Like, how would you kind of put them in different buckets or talk about them separately?
To me, the way I explain it on our team is UI is what people see and UX is what people feel. And so you have to have both. And so UI and UX to me are those two things. And so people define it lots of different ways. Sometimes I've heard UX defined by, clicks or how intuitive things are and things along those lines. But I think of it more as like, what's the experience in terms of how I'm feeling?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that does make sense. Most of the UI people I know are more like developers and less like marketers, which is pretty different. Like those two categories of people are pretty substantially different. But if you're a user experience, you have to think like, well, what are people going to see when they hit this website? Are they going to go this way or that way, and why? And what are we trying to optimize for exactly? And how do we present this type of thing to them in this way or whatever? And that would absolutely not be something a UI person would do. They just get the orders. Okay, you need this button to do this thing. Okay, fine. I'll make it look pretty.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That kind of nuts and bolts type stuff is important. And obviously it's critical when you're trying to optimize everything. But to me, the journey is more about the feeling that the customer is going to have all the way through the process. And the best customers that we work with have been able to identify the moments that matter, right? And you can think of anything that you deal with, right? Whether it's from buying a car to riding on a plane to anything else. There are key moments in that thing that absolutely matter. Like you buy a new car, that minute you walk off the lot, how do you feel at the end of that transaction? That's a moment that matters. When you're on an airplane and they give you bad news and tell you that the flight's delayed, that is a moment that matters. One of those is positive, one of those is negative. And to me, I've realized is you can't stop moments that matter. They're going to happen in any business. But what you can do is change the behavior that someone is going to have as a result of that. And so if you can control their attitude by making sure that you've done everything you can to make the positives higher and the lows a little bit less, then you can control that behavior, and then therefore you can get a different outcome than just getting ripped apart on the latest review site or something like that.
There's this website years ago. It was like websitesthatsuck.com, and it was somebody who was he was kind of a normal human being. He wasn't a especially great UI person, but he because he was a normal person, he didn't know all the fancy things you have to do, like tabs and whatever. He was just like, what's going on this webpage? And it was hilarious. Just, he's like, what am I supposed to be doing? Like his mouse is taken over and there's like sparkles going everywhere. And he's like, am I supposed to click or not click? I don't know what's happening. And it was very funny to watch him because he was just, like I said, a normal human being. And he's just totally frustrated and confused about what's happening. Like it was perfect. I really wish he had kept doing it. But I think that speaks volumes about the normal human beings that we're interacting with. I mean, these normal people, you can't make these very sophisticated flows and expect that 100% of people are going to know what you're doing. You got to. When I was at eBay, we had the unfortunate reality of having to support effectively every browser on the planet.
Yeah.
Like every one of them.
Oh, yeah.
Like everyone. And I remember one of the board members' neighbors, who also was like a journalist or something, used web TV. And so we had to support web TV. And hundreds of thousands of dollars of changes to flows and make things work on web TV. And we had to buy a web TV to have one to test with because like that's not part of the QAing. And after it was all over, just like we had finally done it, it actually worked. I'm like, why didn't we just buy this guy a computer? Like it would have been so much cheaper.
That one guy.
Guy. And so, yeah.
Yeah. I had the same thing happen to me where, I have one of those parents who insists on keeping their AOL account. And I'm like, dude, and no amount of rational explanation of like, so we decided that the company should go from America Online to American Online, as in the one person, my dad, will not give it up. He is the American Online.
Keeping the dream
keeping
alive.
that torch going. So.
Yeah. Well, I actually know one other fairly old.
Oh, there's two Americans?
Actually, no, I don't think he uses it anymore. Never mind. I think your dad's the one. Literally. I feel bad for the AOL team. I actually know them fairly well from a previous life, and they really actually did know what they were doing. They had some pretty good technology for the time, but it just did not last.
Yeah.
Bad UX. All right. So tell me about Oracle CX. First of all, I've heard it's going away, but what is it? And I don't have any context.
Sure. Yeah. So, the thing is most people don't know that much about Oracle. And in fact, if they know anything at all about Oracle, it's because they remember seeing them in Iron Man. They're kind of like the silent giant of the tech world, right? I mean, they're not flashy. They'll never do a Super Bowl ad. God help them. I wish they would, but they're just everywhere, right? They're just behind every single major company. When you go through the Bay Area, at least they put up billboards that say 9 of the top 10 retailers use Oracle, and 8 of the top 10 these use Oracle, and so on and so forth. Do they still
have that office that looks like a database?
They still have that. Their headquarters is now here.
Yeah, I heard that.
I mean, Larry is in Lanai now, so he doesn't matter. But yeah, the headquarters is here in Austin. They still have the database cylinder buildings in Redwood Shores in California, but yeah, nobody knows who they are. And that's hilarious to me because the amount of money they spend on R&D is bigger than 99% of the software companies in the world. They spend $6.3 billion a year on research and development. And they're I think pretty close to 55 billion in revenue. So they're just huge, but people just forget about them. So when it comes to customer experience, they have that as an entire segment of what they do. And so they've got 6 segments of software plus their tech business. And this is one of their segments. So they are not going away. They're ranked as one of the top, customer experience platforms, according to just about any one of the Forresters or Gartners or anything else. They do make odd decisions though. They have this unbelievable suite of stuff that all connects and finally talks to each other. It didn't for a long time, but it does now. And, just on December 7th last year, they yanked this beautiful part of the product.
Why? Do you have any idea?
I don't know.
Yeah, I tried to look it up, and it was just sort of we're just not going to do it.
I've heard rumors that I couldn't speculate upon without violating a bunch of people's confidence, but they're just rumors. Nothing's confirmed. But I did try to convince them to if you're going to just throw it in the trash, could I have it? And tried to work something out on that. But they're steadfast that they're just going to exit that one. So it's a strange aberration from what otherwise is going on. But no, I mean, sales, marketing, service, all integrated, all working together. AI, chatbots. I mean, you can name all the buzzwords that you want. They're all in there, and they're all part of the platform, and they're all integrated and talking to all the financials and supply chain modules that you would expect, plus e-commerce and everything else. And it's great. And it's been to me, it is a great toolkit that we can then build all of the things that we want on top of it. So it's been pretty terrific.
I find that very annoying. It's one of the reasons I really don't like using any Google products if I don't absolutely have to, because you never know. Tomorrow it could totally be gone. I think Google's ended something like 30 of their products, and it looks like Oracle's starting to do the same. I mean, I'm sure there's some business efficiencies associated with doing it, but wow, it's really annoying when you get used to using a product and you start building business processes around it.
Yeah.
Or an entire company in your case.
It's easy on the outside to scratch your head and wonder. On the inside, I know there's a rationale to it. But I mean, pick your large company and name one that has never end of life something that they just decided that they were sick of. I mean, it doesn't matter. Microsoft does it. Apple does it. Everybody does it. And so occasionally they do it. And they did it last month or 2 months ago. And I thought that was a little odd. But otherwise, the rest of the suite is intact. And
so what's the plan? What are you going to focus on if it's not that?
Well, the whole suite is there except for one thing. So it's kind of like a boxer who's missing one tooth. We've got all the rest of the teeth. Okay. So we can bite pretty well with the rest of that suite. But we do see a gap there. And actually at Motiv, we're working right now on a couple of different path to take that entire installed base of customers, of which there's a very healthy installed base, and find a new home for them. So,
Okay. All right.
so the plan on that is still TBD. We are trying to figure that out, but right now that is definitely a piece. So
Seems
that's
like
one part.
Could
which
be a big piece of business for you.
I think so. Yes. So
Yeah,
that's
migration process.
yeah,
whatever that is.
migration process. And so, yeah, moving them. And so the product was called Content, and it was their one place where you could put all of your video recordings and your audio recordings and every blog article you ever wrote. And it was a beautiful product. I mean, it was one of their best products, in my opinion. I had been on the board for several years of their customer advisory board, and I thought it was just stunning. So, I mean, it applied to everybody. Like, you could hold all your podcasts on there, for example. And, large companies put all their translations of all their data sheets and everything all in one spot that was all connected. So, and then you could publish it from there to any website or mobile app or anything else. And so it was just perfect headless content, and it was cheap and it was fast. It was great. So why they pulled the plug on that one product, I don't know, but the rest of the suite is still there. So
they're going more to an S3 model or something.
Mm.
Okay. Well, let's shift a little bit, because I think one of the things that in your bio and looking you up a little bit that you really focus on is the user experience, and not so much just the technology behind it and supporting it from a technology perspective, but the actual user experience, like what did the user actually encounter. So I think kind of stepping into that without getting in there all the way is, let's talk about kind of corporate empathy. Like, how do you get empathy towards your customers and experience what they're experiencing, or getting in their heads a little bit before we get to like how to solve that problem?
Yeah, that has been something that I think is a lot of fun to go explore. And I am having, to be completely candid with you, a tough time scaling that part of the business, because
I bet.
it does require a lot of EQ to really understand and get people not only to share what it is that they're going through, but then express it to you, and then to really capture that in some way that you can then explain to the rest of the company.
And when you say them, you mean customers in this case?
Yeah, customers, right? Because, I mean, a survey is not going to bring that out, right? You have to do direct interview to get that to work. And then, of course, there's some newer methods that we're working on right now, but so far, jury's out as to whether any of them can really bring that depth of emotion on, what is the sentiment that people are feeling. And so, we've looked at so many different platforms around what's called tacit knowledge, which is what people are saying when they realize they're not being recorded, versus what they say when they are being recorded, and trying to get to the tacit feelings that they have in the moment is very, very difficult. So it is that part does not scale, and it is an effort that I found to be house to house fighting. It is really difficult to get that, but if you can get that, then you can start to build a journey map. And so the only hack that I've ever really found for that is if you have really detailed subject matter experts who have a lot of customer interaction, FaceTime, and then they can start to craft personas with you, and then you can back that up with more research, and then you can build out the personas that you're looking for and build your journey maps off of that.
What about like, there's a lot of tech for like eye tracking, for instance, and like even measuring people's like heart rate, or how if they flush or whatever, using thermal cameras. I mean, there's a bunch of versions of the same kind of biometric stuff.
Yeah.
Have you looked into that at all?
Just tangentially. I've never really had a chance to really spend too much time on that stuff. So
what I've noticed, the several studies I've seen for projects I've been involved with, they're kind of only vaguely useful, because they kind of push you in weird directions. Like if you have a picture of a person, your eye will naturally go to their eyes. Like it'll just whoosh right over their eyes.
Yep.
So you're thinking, great, that's the thing. We'll just put more eyeballs on this. Like that's how we get more attraction. It's like, no, that's how you confuse people.
Yeah.
Because they're like, what is that person supposed to be telling me something or doing something, or like, am I interacting with that person? Like, it's a very strange user experience, actually. Although it's such a common one that people can't articulate, that they're no longer paying attention to your call to action anymore, or whatever you wanted them to look at, they're not looking at that anymore.
I have found that, you can get so wrapped up in testing the tool or getting things to work around the tool that you forget the original purpose why you had the tool to begin with, right? And so, your eyeball example is a perfect case like that. I mean, another case that I saw was I worked with some call centers where they were just obsessed with call time, right? We have to get call time down. Call time, it's just, oh my God, the call time is 5 minutes. This is a disaster. So I remember this one.
Just hang up on them.
Where, yeah, I mean, you could just hang up on them and now your call time's 30 seconds. But I'll never forget this one. It was a really interesting company that did all kinds of industrial metal products. And I had no idea how big the market was for like pieces of metal with a hole in it, like whether that's the gratings that go over industrial floors or whether it's a really cool high-end restaurant that has like a metal hanging thing with holes in it. Or, I mean, there's just a million uses for metal with holes in it, and it's a big business. So this call center would take calls from all sorts of industrial designers and architects, and the calls were 5 minutes. And
that makes sense though.
Yeah, well,
because you have to measure them and talk about whatever the density is.
You
and
would
blah, blah,
think,
blah.
right? So, but when we got in there and we started listening to what was going on in the call center, a lot of people were just like, "Hang on, I'm waiting on my system," and like that those terrible awkward silences. It was like a long pause, and then they would find the one product they need, and they'd hang up. So, we streamlined it, did all the UI UX stuff that you could imagine, and we got it really really slick, and so we deploy it, we train everybody. And we leave and we're going through stabilization, no issues. So I call after 30 days and I'm like, hey, everything's stable. Everything's good, right? Yeah, it is. How's call time? 5 minutes. Oh no, this is bad. So I said, hey, I can come back and check. He said, no, just let it play out for a bit. So I call him 30 days later and say, hey, how we doing? How's that call time? 5 minutes. And I said, I'm really sorry, Andy. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, I thought that we had this thing down. He goes, no. He's like, you understand, it's the quality of the 5 minutes. Before we would spend 5 minutes and it'd be a lot of dead time as people were saying, hang on, I'm waiting for my system. Now it's 5 minutes, but they're exploring different options. They're upselling, they're cross-selling, they're going back and forth. They're showing things. There's a lot more interactive discussion, and the average time the sale has tripled. We are now selling 3 times as much per hour as we were before. And this is the greatest ROI project we've ever had. And it taught me, the lesson was, don't be so obsessed about what you want that you wouldn't take something better. Mm-hmm. And when I look at, to bring it back to all those, different kinds of tacit knowledge tools and customer survey things, and you can get so wrapped up in trying to just get the tool to show you some conclusions that you forget that the whole purpose was to just draw the conclusions and then optimize your product. And sometimes you can do that in a lot more simple ways.
So how do companies, when you're trying to devise this kind of empathy, how do you kind of maintain your own sort of, I don't know how to phrase it exactly. How do I make sure that I am not giving too much of myself in this process? Because I think, to this example, it's a great one. Obviously, they were giving too much of themselves in the old design, and they were giving the right amount of themselves in the current design. But there are types of optimizations where you see actual degradation in their values because they're just trying to pontificate. They're just trying to attach themselves to like another campaign. There's no new social thing that's happening. Like we're out there too. We're out there marching for roll a dice, whatever random thing, instead of actually having true empathy for their customers. It's like their customers are almost a full afterthought. But if you were to ask them, they'd say, of course we're talking to our customers. That is our customers. And there's something lost there, and I don't know how to phrase that exactly.
Well, what I'm hearing you say is that if somebody tries to make a formula out of sincerity, then it's not sincere anymore, is sort of what I'm hearing you say.
I think that might be right.
And I think that's true. I think there is always going to be a little bit of imagination that people need to have when they're creating a really great customer experience. And, if you just realize like, I'm going to take the social cause of the day and I'm going to social jack that cause and just,
Is that a word?
Social jack? I don't know. I just made it up. Do you think it's a word?
It is now.
All right. We're going to hashtag that, social jacking. So, so if you want to social jack on something, fine. Like, that's, you could run that formula, but now the sincerity's gone. Right. And people I think that's one thing. We all have a very good BS meter. And I think as soon as people hear BS, they tune out pretty quickly and the magic is gone. And so it's really about being able to be authentic, while still at the same time, continuing to maintain organized processes that result in predictable outcomes for people. That's those two things together. And I mean, it can be done. I mean, Disney does it every single day in a million different ways. So it's entirely possible. But yeah, you can't lose the sincerity.
I think you're totally right. I see a lot of very large companies it's just so tone deaf. And so I'm a fairly high up executive at this point in my career. And I'm like, I would never buy from that company on that campaign. Like, I don't even remember a time where I thought that would have worked on me, like it's so tone deaf. And I think part of it is the media teams, the marketing teams, they have no direct connective tissue to the customers at all. They're so abstracted. They're in their own weird little world where they're just like, let's come up with another idea. And I haven't been on TikTok and I saw someone doing something, so let's jump on that. It's like, are your customers on TikTok? Are any of them on TikTok? Or are they on there in a professional sense where they're following you because they're looking for important news about your product or products like your product? Like, no, they're not on TikTok for that reason. They're just fucking around. And so why are you hiring people with absolutely no direct connective tissue at all to the buyers or the potential buyers? You know what I mean? Like some of the best marketers I've met, actually I work with one of them still. You wouldn't know it by looking at her or talking to her. She's very kind of relaxed and quiet and kind of unassuming, but she knows everybody. She knows more people than I do. Like, we go to conferences and people will come up to her and talk to her because she knows what's going on better in our industry than I do, which is crazy, because I know a lot. But she knows all the people and the places and who's going where and like what's going on. That company, got acquired by so and so, and like, how do you have time to remember all this? It's like, it's incredible, deep knowledge. And so for her to talk to, let's say, like some vendor or some partner or the Gartner, you mentioned Gartner before or something, it's like cake. And she's authoritative, and they go to her for like answers because she knows better than me standing right next to her, and I'm the expert, if that makes sense. So like, how do you bridge that gap? I mean, how do you get the marketing team to actually empathize for real?
Yeah. Well, I mean, your friend's an example of a virtuous cycle, right? And I try to look at things from a standpoint of, is there a virtuous cycle or diminishing returns? Because everything to me goes one of two ways. Very few things are actually truly linear. So if you think about like a large brand, if they've got a brand that's a mass market appeal, then they can usually kind of get pretty close to on the nose with resonating with their customers because they're just such a wide swath and their message is watered down. And so I think if the marketing team is detached from the customer, they can pretty much do everything they need to do with survey data, right? To me, the more interesting place in business is when you're the underdog and you're trying to attack a niche. Because to get to the niche, that's when you've got to know the customer, right? You got to know what that niche needs that's not being served by the mass market appeal. And so if you try to use mass market techniques, you get crushed. And I think that's where you wind up detached. And so I don't know the specific example you were talking about who you wouldn't buy from, and I don't know if you want to say them, but if they're on TikTok and they're a mass market company, they're probably on TikTok because just everybody's got to be on TikTok for mass market. I mean, that's just where eyeballs are right now. So just saying anything, regardless of whether it's relevant or not, is probably okay for those guys. But you wouldn't see anybody going after a niche unless they could hyper target on TikTok and really go after it with something that they knew that they were, hyper articulate about what it is that they were doing in the niche.
I have literally never been on TikTok other than to create an account for my media team so that they could be on TikTok.
So the only time I've ever been, quote, on TikTok is when I'm at the airport and I'm looking around at the other people sitting down and I'm like, who's on TikTok and what are they doing? And then I admit this, I judge them. I'm like, are you very intelligent? I don't know, but you're on TikTok and I need to know what you're watching. So I look over people's shoulders and creep around the airport and I look at what they're watching on TikTok. And usually it's pretty brain dead and I can't seem to get myself on there, but I do feel like I have to explore it just to know.
Okay. Well, so then how do you emote in a way as a company, your values in a way that doesn't sound completely tone deaf?
Well, the values that we provide to our clients, are going to be one level of that. And then the second level is then how's our client trying to articulate things to their end customer. So just taking the first part of that, which is how do we connect with our clients? I mean, the one thing about choosing core values, and I've gone through a lot of these different exercises, is, it seemed like maybe 15 or 20 years ago, people were like, we got to have core values. And they would just, grab whatever Franklin Covey store poster they could have, and they'd have people rowing on the wall, and it would say teamwork, and it wouldn't mean anything to anybody.
I actually worked with a company who made that. It was Mach 37 or something. And it was just, they just slopped it together.
Yeah, it doesn't mean anything to anybody. And I remember at the time, one of my, a frustrated person who was not well liked in his company, but I thought he was really funny. He said, these values are so like common, so watered down, so like what we all believe. He's like, we could just put up there like, we don't believe in killing bunnies with axes, because most of us aren't running around doing that, And he said, why don't we make that a core value, since it's something everybody stands behind? And it took me a long time to really articulate what the problem was, until actually my sister, who's an entrepreneur, really came to start her first company. And she was just outraged by how little authors made of their own books from publishers. And so her core value was, more money for the author. And I was like, okay, well, that's a stance that, and she really inspired me to realize that that's what a core value can be, is it's got to be something that is taking a stand for something that maybe not everybody believes in, but it truly is going to be something that's going to be important to what we do in our company. So all that to be said is that, when I was trying to come up with what are the core values for Motiv and how do we make something that's going to resonate with our employees and our clients, I even went one step behind core values and said, I really believe that mission should come first before core values. Because if you have the mission, then the core values take a stance in line with that core value, or in line with that mission. So we took a long time to really think about this, and I really
wanted with axes. I got it.
Yeah, I really wanted to. No bunnies with axes. At Motiv, we really tried to boil down the essence of what it is that we do, and I wanted it to be one word, because if it was this long, flowery thing, it'd sound like pretty much what the muffler shop. They usually have a mission on the wall, and it sounds like some kind of thing that's hard to resonate with. So we just realized that at the end of the day, everything that we were doing, it was all customer experience and all this stuff, but really what it was about was growth. And growth became kind of our mantra. It's our one word mission is growth of our people, growth of our clients. And then of course, if that works out well, then growth of the bottom line for both of us. And so our core values then were all about trying to resonate with companies that our biggest one is acorn to oak, which is we're just looking for people who have something that is scalable, and it might be small today, but has that potential. And so we're really looking for something that's going to pop like that. So acorns to oaks is a huge value for us. And we talk about that a lot with our clients. We have some others too, but I think that's the most salient.
How do you communicate it? How do you emote that externally?
Acorns to oaks, it's done in a couple different ways. We internally, we have a bunch of awards and things that we do and ways that we recognize that as part of our culture. Externally, the way we emote acorns to oaks is really by just making sure that we're measuring the ROI of our projects. And when we go into our customers, we usually start small. So we oftentimes, there's a temptation in our industry to want to just go in and try and sell somebody a big honkin' project and just, make a massive splash out of the gate. But that's usually how you overrun budgets really fast and then wind up in a morass. So what we do is we do the opposite. We come in and we try to say, what is the absolutely smallest projects we can do that's going to build momentum, and then we go from there. So,
yeah, I'm always kind of curious how companies have a stand without seeming preachy, without kind of watering down what the product is, because they're, it's like, yeah, our goal. Like I'll hear companies, and I work in the security industry, so I'll hear companies say something like, "Our mission is to protect customers," and you look at their product, and it's about finding vulnerabilities. It's like, you don't protect anything. You just find vulnerabilities. Like there's no protection at all built into your product. And so like their core value is completely devoid of any meaning, really. It's like this sort of abstract thing. Well, if you go do a bunch of work, you'll be protected. Like, okay, you're creating work for me is what you said. That's your core value, is make a bunch of work for me. Because you're not doing the thing you say you're going to do. So I'm always kind of curious how to get that more pointed in a useful sort of way, where you're not being preachy. You're really just, trying to explain something that's fundamental about your company.
Yeah. To me, that comes down to authenticity. Right. And so, the example that you just gave, we're here to protect people. That is detached from what it is that we do. probably be more authentic to say something like, we're going to find the holes that you wished weren't here. Yeah. And, hey, that's what we do. But the thing that I'll take the opposite side of this and say that every businesses are so much work, right? It's so much stress. It's so much risk that the only reason you do this is, everybody's looking for a paycheck. That's fine. But there's always been a founder story when you get in there as to like why this particular thing. And I think, in my case, it came a little bit later because, as I admitted earlier in the show, I just needed a job when I got started.
Yeah, that's on the About Us. It's got to be there.
Yeah, but why you could always quit. You could always do something else. There's always a choice. So at some point, a why emerges, and for me, it took me a couple years to really figure that out. For other companies, it comes naturally, or at least they narrate it that way. But there's always a desire to make the world a better place. And I know that sounds a little cliche and corny, but that's at the heart of every founder's story. And whether it's, I just met Juan Rodriguez. He's a local Austin guy who has that amazing parking company that makes the parking meters and has taken over. I mean, he had 5 ideas for different businesses. And the only reason he went into that one was, where that one came from is his co-founder had a wife who was going around, and she had a job where she, was restocking hotels with different supplies and whatnot. And she hated the fact that every time she valet parked, it was a huge inconvenience to get the car back and all that stuff. And so out of his 5 ideas, he pitched them to all the VCs, and unanimously 10 times out of 10, they came back and were like, fix the parking thing, man. Fix it. And so there was his thing. It was just like, everybody hates valet parking and the things. And he made that his business. But it's a great story as to like how somebody winds up making, little things that go up and down and make parking better.
Yeah. That is a good story.
Yeah.
So you were recently hacked. You posted on LinkedIn.
Personally.
Yes, personally hacked. Yes, to be clear. How did that go?
It was a non-event, to tell you the truth. I mean, so on the one hand, I was hacked. It was a hospital that I was seeing for just routine medical services. And I knew the exposure couldn't be that bad because A, I already had identity theft protection all over the place. And B, I'd only been there for, 3 months and been there for like 2 consultations. So the hack couldn't be that bad.
Well, it depends on what you were doing.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't want to put that all out there, but like it was a pretty minor thing. Like, so it was just like routine stuff, you know?
Yeah.
And so I was just like, all right, well, it's not that bad. But what I did notice is that, they did everything by the book, and I'll keep their name out of this. But they did the mea culpa, and they did the letter with the incident report, and they were really transparent. And I mean, the thing is they did that because they had to, right? The law says they have to do that. They have to offer all these things. But the point I was making when I shared that with everyone was, even if you didn't have to offer this, even if you didn't have to do this by law, I think they're better off as a business having done it. Because on the one hand, like, I'm more engaged with them. I actually trust them more because of the transparency and everything that was there. And there is that whole saying of like, any publicity is good publicity. And I think that was true for
absolutely a true thing about these types of things.
Yeah. So I think that, by having good character, by, modeling.
Well, it depends on how you do it. I have massive caveats about this. I have seen this wildly backfire when people kind of trickle out information and like, oh, don't do that. Really don't do it. Or if you have to do it for some reason, be really transparent. Like we're still in our investigation. We'll get back to you in 24 hours or 48 hours. Like give them a cadence. Like, this is ongoing. We can't tell you yet because we don't know yet. Fine. But don't like string me on forever, you know?
Right. Well, so one example that was not done by legislation, it was just like a character moment for a good company, was, I don't know if you remember, but I think it was Johnson & Johnson who had to pull aspirin from the shelves because they found out that some crazy person was just putting poison into the aspirin, right? And as soon as they found out about it, they let everybody know. They shouted from the rooftops. Even the CEO was like running to his local store to like grab the aspirin off the shelf to like stop that from happening. And they went everywhere. They got it cleaned up. And I mean, this must have been like 30 or 40 years ago. And I don't know the details of the story exactly, except that people who work for Johnson & Johnson 20 years later talk about it with pride, how they did the right thing. And like, it has so much more impact and momentum to do that after the fact that I thought that was kind of a really cool moment. And so, yeah, the temptation whenever something goes wrong is to, hide it. And I mean, I can tell you one time, I will admit this, I accidentally, it is totally 100% my fault. I was working with a utility and they noticed there was a problem with some of the text alerts that we were sending out. And I was extremely stressed about that, met with the development team and asked them to run some tests. And I will admit this, I had them skip some protocols. They accidentally tripped it into an infinite loop. And I sent 100,000 people like 50 text messages. And like that pissed off a lot of people, including my client, who was outraged, and rightfully so, at me. Yeah. And I offered them, I said, look, if you want to get on YouTube and have me go door to door to like, there were 10 people who received 100 text messages. But fortunately, most people received like 1 or 2. Right. But 10 people received over 100 text messages, and it was all my fault. Yeah. And I said, you can film me going door to door. I will bring baskets of like gifts and apologize to them. And you can put that up on your website. Yeah. And the shame to me will be there, but at least we'll have made this right, and we'll let everybody know. And you can blame it all.
It'll be a comedic.
It will be. It'll be kind of funny, and you can blame it all on me. And they actually didn't take me up on the offer, though I was willing to do it. But I mean, it's the only way to handle a situation like that. And it was so painful and so hard to realize how many people I'd stressed out and disrupted, because I went to a Michigan football stadium not too long ago, and there's 100,000 people that sit in that bowl. And I was like, this is how many people I accidentally texted. And I was like, oh God, that's just so bad,
Oh, good point.
Oh, that was hard to take.
Yeah. So this is the way to handle these types of things. I've done many kind of breach analysis. I've looked at a lot of other people's. You first have to explain what happened. It seems simple enough. You just tell them what happened. Like, what happened? We were compromised in this way. Okay, great. It's so much easier when you say it that way, because then people don't have to guess. Like wonder, well, what if they also got this other thing? No. They got this thing. This is what they got. This is what they did. This is what they got. And you just neuter 90% of the questions right there if you fully explain what happened. Next, explain how you found out. For some reason, if people don't know how you found out about it in the first place, they just don't trust that the rest of the information is true.
Yeah.
So you have to say, we were notified when X happened. It's like, okay, all right. So you have these kinds of alerts set up. That's good. I mean, at least they exist. At least you have some communication path. Or worst case scenario, our clients called and complained because blah, 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 blah. It's like, okay, shit. So you need better, reporting to have caught this thing. But it's important because now I know really the full state of affairs of how bad the situation actually is with those combination of those two things. Next, explain what you've done or are doing to make sure it won't ever happen again. So this is the remediation part. So yes, we have better, out-of-band communications with blah, 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 blah. We set up honey tokens. We have firewalls that stop blah, blah, blah. We have these kind of patches. We have security systems we have new pen testers coming in to test stuff or whatever. All of that and more. Like, really be very thorough about how this could never possibly ever happen again. It just can't happen. Like, you can see all the things they've done. Like, oh yeah, then it could never happen again. Yeah. Or we stopped having this kind of data. We just deleted it. Even better. It's like, we don't even have this data anymore because it was too dangerous for us to have it. Great. Then it can't happen again. And then what you're going to do to make the customer whole. So this is the bit of a tricky one, because you can give them like credit reporting, which actually is a cost upside. You can actually make money by giving them credit report, or you can give them a discount, a coupon or whatever, or free whatever, but then you make money because now they're more loyal customers. And you can actually turn this into a profit center as opposed to a downside. In fact, it works so well that you can send another follow-on email saying, oops, we are so sorry for what happened. Here's the website with all the details again. And by the way, here's your coupon code, and to get them back in there. And people just love opening oops emails and like, oh yeah, I didn't even know about that thing. And now you got them back and looking at the thing, more loyal customers. And the side benefit of having it on the website as well as the email is all the press will link to it. If you have a standard place where it all lives, because they want to talk about it. It's like, oh, here's their full report. And now you have all these backlinks coming in, and you leave it there for a year, and then you flip it over to the home site or homepage or whatever. And you're off to the races. Now you have all this positive SEO back to your website that you had to do very little for. And the last one is explain how much you value them as a customer. Just tell them like what they mean to you and be sincere. And this is where you can really, really fuck up if you don't do it right. Because just saying we really value you as a customer is not enough.
No,
it is not enough. So first of all, what do you think of those 5 things?
Well, I think with crisis comes opportunity, right? And so it's like so many things in life, it's not the problem, it is how one responds to it, right? And I think people like when it happened to me, so the people who lost my information went through the exact steps that you described. They ran that playbook, and I can tell you it works. I mean, and why did it work? Because what I really needed to know at the end of the day was that my illusion that my life is under my control is back in place. You know, I feel like I'm back under control. Yes, I understand what happened. I understand how it happened. I understand that you've made me whole. I feel like I'm in control of all this. And then yes, the sincere last step of like, and hey, we're really sorry and we value you. I think if they can say that in a way that goes with the rest of that, I think it's pretty believable at that point because all the other steps are in place. So yes, so you give that customer, in this case me, that belief, I'm back in control of my life, because that was really the thing that upsets me about the whole thing is that if my information's out there, I don't know what's out there, how it got out there, how it happened. Will it happen again? I have no control over this situation. I don't know how to, what's going to happen. And I don't know whether I'm going to get my identity back or if I'm at risk. Mm-hmm. So that's what it really comes down to. Give people a sense of control.
So I have sometimes I get pre-releases of books related to the podcast. And so I'm reading Brad Englert's book, Spheres of Influence. And he reminded me of this thing that Gary Chapman and Jennifer Thomas in the 5 languages of apology said. It's very similar. It's very similar. And I did not intentionally do this. So I literally was just reading it today. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so weird because I had already planned to kind of talk about this because of your event. So number 1, express regret. I'm sorry. Number 2, accepting responsibility. I was wrong. Number 3, making restitution. What can I do to make it right? Number 4, genuinely repenting. I will try to not do that again. And lastly, requesting forgiveness. Will you please forgive me? Man, that is close. That is so really close. The only thing that's kind of, I would say, really different is that I'm sorry and I was wrong. It's not just that you're sorry. It's like, here's what happened. Right. It's like, it's not just saying I'm sorry. It's like, I was an asshole in this very specific way. You know what I mean? Like that kind of it's like, I'm not just sorry. I know what I did wrong. You know what I mean? Once you admit it out loud, it kind of takes all the sting away.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, now I can see that you care because you've done that level of introspection.
Yeah. You validated, someone for the feeling that they were wronged.
Right.
So, yeah.
I think that's really kind of funny that these things were super similar because I've been working on that playbook that you were talked about, the hacking playbook, for probably 20 years and slowly trickling it out. Every time this happens, I'm like, here's how to do this next time because this company messed it up. They missed the 3rd step or they missed the 4th step or whatever. And every time and all these people jump on them because they're not doing it exactly the way you need to do it. I'm like, I just keep telling people do it over and over. And strangely, it's starting to trickle out. And I don't know if they read it from me or picked it up from some crisis comms person who figured it out on their own or whatever. But I'm really glad people are starting to realize that this is how to do it, because ultimately you have to have your North Star. This is where your persona and the one that you've been having this entire time really matter. Because if you're just an asshole, generally speaking, are they going to trust that now you're a nice person and you're doing all the right stuff? Is that the persona you're cultivating? Like, I'm just a badass and nothing ever bad ever happens to me. It's like, well, haha, that, and like, fuck you,
Yeah. Well, I don't know if this translates to the personal side of it, but on the business side, like what I've always been impressed with is when I've met with other entrepreneurs and they have been able to present to me their entire risk stance, everything that is risky in their business, because every business has risks, and they have a mitigation plan for first of all, a prevention plan, but then should the risk actually come into place, they've got a a damage control plan as well. And having those things, like the first time I saw that about 10 years ago, I mean, it just was a blind spot for me. I just never thought about like having damage control plans for all the things that could go wrong. And what a relief it is when you have those things, because sooner or later, one of them gets tripped, and being able to dust off the plan and be like, can we adapt this to make it work? It's amazing. It is so powerful.
Years ago, I had a DDoS run book and distributed denial of service run book. And one of the kind of key components is just like, who's in charge of what?
Yeah.
Who's in charge? Because the day that happens is not the day you want to try to figure that out. You don't want to be running around going, who is our network operations people? Like, you don't want that to happen. And that surprisingly large amount of companies really just haven't done the basics. Yeah. So when the bad thing happens, it's like, well, I'll just send them an email. You can't, your site's down. You can't, or whatever, you know, or like our contact form, everyone will let us know that if the thing's down. You can't, your site's down. You know, there's all these things that they just assume are going to work, and they just cannot work in that environment. So
all these things fall in the category of they are absolutely so critically important, but they are not at all urgent. Like you can not have that plan for like a day, a week, a month, and nothing will be different until the day when you need it, right? And then everything's different, right? Everything's different. But you know, there's so many of those in business, and I think one of the hardest things that I've had to deal with as an entrepreneur and a coach of other entrepreneurs at the Entrepreneurs Organization is, you know, how do you balance your time around the things that need to happen today, like the things you've got to execute on, versus taking that time to be ready to go and have those plans for the things that may not ever happen. But if they do, boy, are you glad you've thought that through. Yeah, and that's a tough one that's a tough balance to get right.
So I think this is worth talking about. There's another thing that happens very frequently. It's where the public writ large starts turning on the brand. And the best example that I can come up with in recent memory was the Dylan Mulvaney Bud Light thing.
Oh yeah,
where just all of a sudden
disaster.
It was a huge disaster. Well, at least temporarily. I went back and looked at their stock price, and it's kind of back to where it was. So it hasn't actually been as bad as I think everyone wanted to think it was. But it was for a while. Let's say maybe they would be much higher today than they are today if everything hadn't been equal, or that hadn't happened. So, okay, so they went out and said, you know, we want to put money on TikTok behind this person, and that is our new corporate values, at least for her viewership. His, her, I don't actually know pronouns, but now the entire internet has decided they don't like that at all, or at least some huge chunk of it. What is a brand to do when you have this massive onslaught just coming at you? And, you know, it's a mix of cancel culture. It's a mix of just general outrage about, you know, politics, and having nothing at all to do with you and your brand. Truly. I mean, nothing really.
Yeah.
But you're caught up in the hellfire. So what then?
Well, you know,
I don't have a run book for that one.
Yeah, I don't have a run book for that one either. And if I did, I think I would definitely tell you about it now. But to me, what it comes down to is I think there was just a little bit of overreaching there to go after an extra segment. I mean, if you give them the benefit of the doubt, right? And you say these people weren't elitists and they were just trying to execute their business. I think they saw a niche that they didn't have any penetration in, right? They had nobody there. But the problem is they're a mass market brand. And so I think what they did is they went after a niche as a mass market brand, and it spilled over. And you know, they tried to appeal to the niche, even if it was appealing, and it clearly like damaged the whole. And that is always the problem with being, you know, a big mass market product, is that you can't do both.
So I think their reaction was met pretty cynically by at least anyone I saw commenting on it.
It was pandering too.
Pandering, and you know, got some horses, and you know, we're back on the ranch. I mean, so first of all, I'd like to refute the idea that they did not know what they were doing, that one side did not know what the other side was doing. That just doesn't work for me mentally, because they had to make custom beer cans for her. That's a fairly large amount of work.
I would accept that. I was just saying what I wasn't.
No, I wasn't disagreeing, but But I think that some people want to think that it was just one person or something. No. Unfortunately, there was a lot more going on there. So it was a fairly big campaign, despite the fact that it was only one person and it was a TikTok video, et cetera, et cetera. But then their response to it is, it was, first of all, it's like, is this person in? Are they out? Well, no, they don't have anything to do with it. And then they're out. Well, so they must have had something to do with it, because otherwise, why did you just randomly fire this person?
That doesn't seem fair.
Why you should get them back. Beg their forgiveness for being terrible to them. Or maybe they were directly involved. So there's a lot of things that happened in quick succession that was clearly, we better come up with a mission statement quick. We better come up with our brand and what we stand for quick. Yeah. Because we've lost two segments at the same time, Right. So where do you land on all that?
Yeah, to me, it's just a lack of clarity around understanding the focus of their customer and what they were going after. Right. And I think typically I don't work on the mass market branding side of things. So it's not my forte per se, but everything that I've seen there says that when you're doing that, you have to be very clear about your brand promise and your cost position and where you sit in the marketplace, and know that mass appeal market. And you, to some extent, have to just accept the fact that you're the whale, and you will be beset by minnows all over the place. And the hardest thing in business is trying to figure out, when does the minnow become a shark, right? And I need to take them out somehow. And so that is always the challenge when you're the leader. It's not as easy a place to stay on top as people think it is. And I think that's both the blessing and curse that they have. So I think I
think there's also something a little weird about being a publicly traded company where you have to get a little bit more every single quarter.
Yeah.
And we're seeing millennials drinking less beer. And as you said, there's lots of beer options, and there are a lot of minnows out there, a lot of micro beer brews or whatever. It makes it hard for them just to be genuine. If they just, and I'm picking on them, but not because it's them. I mean, I think it's true of any publicly traded company. When you start looking at their values, they started off like trying to change the world, and now they're a publicly traded company. They are not changing the world. I mean, not in any positive way anyway.
Yeah. Funny enough, just today I was sitting down with the founders of HomeAway, and we were talking about
Brian Sharples and those guys.
Yeah, Brian Sharples and those guys. And we were talking about in 2014 when Airbnb is coming on hot, and they have to decide, do they stay subscription or do they move to like a pay per transaction? And, one of the questions that came up is, well, we're publicly traded, so can we think about the long term or the short term? And the answer was, to answer these questions, we have to be thinking about the short term, because there is no long term. There's just like, you either have the short term success or you're gone, right? Or worse. And when you're in that situation, I think you're so stuck that you just can't help but have a tremendous weakness that anybody who's private can take advantage of. And it's just a matter of time before anybody in the private market can figure out what would offset your access to the public capital that you have access to. And once they have that, that's the end. And it doesn't matter then at that point, because now you're stuck. And I think it's death by 1,000 cups as they just, basically move into checkmate. And that's a tough place to be.
So can you fake it? I mean, is there a way to be fake genuine and get by? Because I see a lot of these companies, it seems like some of them are obviously bad. Just looking at them like, this is just terrible marketing. It's not appealing to anyone that I know of. I can't even think of a buyer who would like this campaign that I'm seeing right now. And surprisingly, there's a lot of them. And also the market segment. So I work with a lot of executives. They do not want an email coming to their inbox telling them about a random special on something, or whether it's just they don't want it. It's wasting their time. If anything, they get frustrated by it. They're trying to figure out how to get rid of it if they have any time to read it at all. And yet it persists, and it's a thing. And it's always this kind of underlying neediness with companies, as opposed to being helpful, as opposed to having some sort of stand that they're trying to, like, So I could see a world in which a company starts a nonprofit as a subsidiary or whatever, a side thing. It's like, well, the subsidiary or the nonprofit or whatever it is, its entire purpose is to educate. Like we understand that this is a very complicated problem, and we don't want our fingerprints all over it. But we want it to exist, so we'll fund it, and we'll go and make a thing. And yes, we'll support it. And yes, our employees kind of dovetail and whatever. And yes, we will contribute heavily because it's our thing. But it's not about us. It's about the industry and what's going on and how this thing works or whatever. I've seen like Duo, for instance, had a brand called Decipher, which is just a news site, and it was about getting people excited about what's going on in computer security. That was very useful to a lot of people, and it wasn't even that clear that Duo ran it. Like if you didn't know, you might not ever know.
Yeah.
But I think that was a very useful way to engage the community and constantly be talking with vendors and outside partners and progressing the greater narrative of computer security, let's say. But it could be any industry. It doesn't really matter. Or maybe there's a way to shortcut it and go faster and just totally fake it.
Well, I don't know if you have to fake it. I think actually, to me, it comes down to it's a question of leadership. And here's what I mean specifically. If you start with the premise that every business solves problems, and I had by the way, Seth Godin has a really wonderful series of blog articles about this, but you've got to remember that every business solves a problem for somebody. Mm-hmm. And if you can tap in and understand what problem you're solving, then there's always a way to articulate that message in a way that's going to resonate with even a senior executive, and whether it's over email or not. The thing about email, and it's a quick aside, is that the number one thing that I've seen people say is, how many emails can we send our customer before it's too many? And I say, well, that's the wrong question to ask, because here's the thing. Like, how many times would you want me to send you the daily winning lottery numbers? Would you like that email every day? Would you like it for every state every day? Can I send you 50 of those a day?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, you'll take them all, right? Mm-hmm. So if I'll take 50 emails from you a day because the content's incredible, then there's your answer, right? You can send people as many messages, and I don't care what medium you're using either. You can do it over TikTok. You can do it over email. You can do it over text. Of course, there's, obviously the permissions you have to have, but assuming you have their permission to do it, it all comes down to the quality of, do you understand what problem you're solving, and can you articulate that in a way that's meaningful at that time? Because if you have nothing new to say, then don't say anything. But if you do have something to say and you're solving a problem, then don't be apologetic about it. Mm-hmm. I'm not interested in an email about a sandwich unless I'm really hungry. Then I'm really interested.
Yeah. So does that mean just more targeting? Because to some degree, targeting absolutely totally works. It absolutely works. But to some degree, it's also creepy, and
it can be.
And it can be very, very creepy.
Oh, yeah.
And I've, my favorite example, I've brought it up in the podcast before, is, people hand delivering marketing swag to my hotel room when I'm at a conference. I'm like, look, I understand what you're trying to accomplish here, but it is doing literally the opposite. I would avoid you like the plague because you've done this. Like, how do I never use your product? Like, you've absolutely pushed me away. And yet I totally understand it and I get it. And I can't even really completely fault their marketing team, because like, where else can we market? Literally in this person's shower. Perfect. Literally when they're fully naked. Perfect time to do that.
Yeah. Well, it all comes. Okay, so I'll give you two quick examples of like what to do and what not to do. So what not to do is the classic example at Target, right? Where they realized that they could look at buying patterns and realize that someone was pregnant. Uh-huh. And then with the best of intentions, they would send you a message that's like, congratulations, we're so happy for you. And that worked really well right up until they sent something to some teenage girl's house and her dad found it and went ballistic, right? Boom. That didn't work.
Or the guy coming back from Iraq who hadn't been home in 10 months or whatever.
Oh, yeah. I can only imagine that. Yeah. It's whoops, it's like way over the line. But the best guerrilla marketing I ever saw was for a spam filter technology. And they put these stickers in the urinal at the trade show, and it said, "This is an inappropriate place to discuss penis size, and so is your email." And I was like, "That's great." You know?
Okay. Hey,
I mean, it was the talk of the trade show. Everyone was laughing about how they did that.
Yeah,
you know,
I mean, the men will find that very funny.
Yeah.
Yes. Good old penis jokes.
Yes.
And then, but then you also get canceled. You know what I mean? There's what was the someone who got canceled for making a dongle joke, dongle gate, because it was like, oh, you got their dongle. You know, it was.
Yeah.
I mean, that's so silly.
The thing about the cancel culture is I think that it will burn itself out is my prediction.
You think so?
I do. I'm an optimist here. I think that every time you invoke the cancel culture, it waters down just a little bit more because it just becomes so much more commonplace, right? I mean, there are the certain things that I think would be hard to defend that I wouldn't want to stand up and try to defend, like the most egregious examples of cancel culture. But as it just gets more and more like sensitive and over the line, eventually I think people just realize like enough, like what else? I mean, I actually played this game with this kid I was coaching where I was like, you say anything at all and I will find a way to be offended by it. And we'll just sit here and play this game until you realize that like either you decide that you're going to be offended by everything and outraged through life, or you just become tougher, you know? And I think that trying to make everyone understand that, yes, there are certainly hurtful things and inappropriate things that people say, but like we are way, way over the line now. Yeah. And I think we boomerang back. Everything in life is a pendulum. It's coming back.
You think it's already coming back?
Yeah.
I hope you're right.
I put it this way.
Right.
I wouldn't have said what I just said 2 years ago. So I feel like it's coming back.
I've had at least 3 conversations in under a week with people who've been fully publicly canceled. Like really, really badly. Death threats and the whole,
wow.
Like you're a horrible person, like just coming after him sort of deal. And I mean, that in all 3 cases, it was in the last 2 years. So it wasn't this year. It wasn't, today or something. But it was recent enough that, the wounds are fresh. And when I hear them talk, they're seething.
Oh yeah.
Because it was unfair, because the same jokes or whatever, or the same things that they did, the same crimes they've committed or whatever, been, thousands of times, or maybe they didn't even commit the crime. And that's even worse. And they're like, I didn't even do the thing. I've done other things, everyone's done something, but certainly not that thing or whatever. I think it's a really kind of dangerous thing, especially when you're talking about companies, because it's not just, a singular person, which is bad enough, right? Hurting one person is really bad, but you hurt an entire company, you might be hurting thousands of people, tens of thousands of people, and all the subcontractors or whatever. If you send that company into abyss, and the trickle effect of all their families and whatever, this is a really big deal.
I think so much of this is just it's a hard-hearted, unwilling to give people the benefit of the doubt. I mean, there's certain things, whether the historical ones are a little bit harder to maybe make this argument for, but certainly when people hear something, or there's a post or a quote taken out of context or something else, and it starts that cancel culture outrage and like the public shaming begins and all the things that you just mentioned, it all comes from a standpoint, I believe, of people being unwilling to give someone the benefit of the doubt or try to find the deeper meaning of the story. It's just easier to just fly off the handle and be outraged. And there's certainly been plenty of things written about outrage culture and how this is there. But I'm an optimist, and I believe that this is a phase, and that what will happen is we will find a way to give people a chance to get the benefit of the doubt or to explain their side of the story. And I just watched this friend of mine's kid go through this, another state, not even in Texas, but she was on a volleyball team, and the volleyball team, it was an all girls volleyball team. It was mixed race, white and black. And they had always practiced doing like whatever their hair or makeup was on this mannequin, and the mannequin was brown, and they never thought about it. Like they were proud of it. It was there, and they took pictures with it, and it was never mocking pictures or anything, but it was just all the girls and their mannequin where they had dressed it up. It had a name and everything else. It was just part of their persona, but somehow a picture got taken to somebody out of context, and suddenly it was this racist thing about this mannequin, and the girls were totally overwhelmed, and nobody gave them the benefit of the doubt. Nobody explained like, hey, this is just part of what we do as a team. That's, you know, there was never a statement here about race. There was only a statement about us as a group. And like, I don't know. It destroyed her senior year, and it was so sad. And it broke the whole school apart, and I just couldn't believe it. So it was really, really, it was hard to hear that story and see that. And I just feel like we're going to find a place where we can start to give each other the benefit of the doubt again. I believe it's coming back. So
I really hope you're right. So with regard to a public persona of some kind, if I've seen a couple of examples of this. I think Yoast is the one that pops in my head most, like right off the top of my head. He's a good buddy of mine. So I was friends with him before and after he went to having kind of a comic book sort of vibe on his thing, where he had actually his own face like personified, and the conversation around that was sort of, people said, well, I think you need to. He's like, I don't really want my name on it. I want to move away from me being the center thing. Like, I want to move it more to like a corporate sort of vibe. And people are like, all these high-end marketing people are like, no, absolutely not. You need to quadruple lean into it being you and you specifically and your brand, and it, create an avatar and, have the whole thing, the superheroes, and you're front and center. And I think he wrestled with it. I don't think he really wanted to do that. I think he wanted to be like fully buttoned up, absolutely perfect, every pixel perfect branding and all that stuff. Very bland corporate, like you'd find like Sun Microsystems or something, like very, very boring IBM or something. And then he went down that path, and the trickle on effect. I mean, he just skyrocketed in popularity, because before it was just a person, and now it was Yoast. Now it was him, and he was the center of it, and it drew a lot of popularity for him and opened up all kinds of opportunities. Eventually, sold his company. So how do you go about kind of creating that sort of excitement for your brand? Like, how do you go from completely top of the funnel, no one ever hearing about you ever, and then they kind of encounter your brand and get sucked down into that, potentially very long funnel, depending on what we're talking about. I might have to move to an entirely new CMS to use Yoast. It's not like if I'm on Wix, it's a pretty heavy lift to get to Yoast, right?
Right. Yeah.
And yet he might make a very compelling case for why you should, and he has, and he's converted a lot of people. So how do you get that sort of excitement?
I first off, I think that, there is that moment of commitment that he had to make, right? Like, he wanted to lean out of that and didn't want to step in there and as you mentioned, and it's in or out, and I think everybody who decides to go down the idea of, I am going to make a public persona, I am going to advocate for some bit of thought leadership, is knowing that they're doing that with that risk in mind. And that is not to be daunted. I know that it was something I was really concerned about as I started to make myself more of a public persona. And
but why were you worried?
I mean, you just never know when you're going to slip and say something like, I could have said something already on this show and I could be canceled. And, because if you're
I'll cancel you later.
You can cancel me later. All right. But, if you're a public persona, then there's always that chance, right? You're going to, and to our earlier conversation about core values, if you're going to take core values that are not bland, right? If you're going to stand for something, then someone's going to stand against you. And if that happens, then it's impossible to understand just where that's going to spiral in the world we live in today. So anybody who's going to be a public persona is going to take a stand. Otherwise, who cares, right? And then when they take that stand, it's not always under their control. And so I think that is the big risk. But once you do it, then I think you can attract the following that you want. And in some ways, it's not bad to be a little bit controversial, because if you can make a point, if you can make people think, if you can give them something to feel that is tied to your product, then I think it makes sense and it can be relevant.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. And then I think you do have something, you have a moment that matters, you have a message that matters, and you can make people feel like there's something that's bigger than themselves.
Yeah. I think, back when I was running hackers.org, I mean, I just hacked everything, just everything. I didn't care. And people were like, well, there's this full disclosure versus, being polite and telling the company what's going on before you just release it to the full internet. I'm like, well, if I like the company, I'll tell them. If I don't, then I'm just going to go straight to the internet. Or if I don't know them and I don't have an existing relationship with them, straight to the internet. I don't care.
And why did you do that?
A complicated set of reasons.
Okay.
But I think, well, the companies I liked, I mean, I already had an existing relationship with them. I'm not going to submarine somebody with whom they're actively trying to work with me and come up with solutions to their problems. And they're maybe behind the eight ball. They have a really complicated software product like Microsoft. I had a really great relationship with those guys. They messed up all the time, but they really were trying to work with me, and man, did they mess up all the time. But they really, God bless them. It's hard to say how much community outreach those guys did.
Wow.
It was really amazing. And that was all the trusted computing platform stuff that they were doing. It was they spent like $1 billion trying to get secure,
Wow.
crazy in 1 year, or one program or whatever. So Google, on the other hand, would be my example of the exact opposite. They did everything they could to push me away. It was like for everything from calling me liar to going to talking to my customers and trying to get them to hate me for some reason. I'm like, that's not going to work. They already know me. Like that's never going to work. But it still was like, this is not a company who wants to work with me. They're not actively trying to make this work. And frankly, I think their business model is predatory, and I just don't think they're an ethical company, period. But companies I don't know, I felt like there was a faster path to pushing the narrative forward. Things aren't secure. And there's two ways to prove that. One is to do the ambulance chasing and calling them up and saying, hey, I found a vulnerability in your stuff. Do you want to talk to me? It's like, who is this guy, right? And it's a whole other thing to put it on hackers.org, right? You put it on there and everyone notices. Everyone's looking right at it. And there's no backing out. There's no second chances. It's now there. And now they're taking this way more seriously because they know hackers are looking at them and their websites, and they've already found problems. Not theoretical problems. There it is. That's the problem. And suddenly we went from, oh, this is kind of a theoretical thing, to everyone took it extremely seriously. I had over 1,000 examples of different companies I had compromised. 1,000 on one forum alone, and probably way more than that spread out throughout the rest of the website. And that really made a big difference, I think. The entire world, I think, they cared about this problem. Just their eyes just went, whoop, we better pay attention to this because this guy's doing a lot of not super damaging things, but very important, dangerous things. They could become damaging if we don't take it seriously, to the point where Google even admitted that they created a custom robot to scrape my website, because every time I mentioned Google, it was probably bad news. And so they'd send a ticket to some engineer somewhere to go take a look at whatever it was to make sure it wasn't, an issue or whatever. I think that for me, pushing the controversy, to your point, I'm getting back there.
I know where you're going.
It was a bit of a road to get there, but the controversy was a very useful technique to get people to finally care about something that I cared about very deeply. And if I didn't do it the way I did it, I don't think anyone would have even noticed. I think it would have just been a bunch of busy work on the back end, calling people and hoping that they do the right thing. And they won't.
Yeah.
Because there's no risk.
Right.
But now that I made the risk obvious, I made it super undeniably obvious. Like I had Google, I'd like to pick on Google. Google had to have a public statement from their CTO about this thing. And I remember I was talking to one of the engineers internally, and I'm like, I just got to know. I think he had actually left at this point. I'm not 100% sure. His name is Corey. And he's like, he was my handler. I've had 2 handlers. And so he was my first handler, and asked, I think it was after he left, I'm like, I got to know, what does Google internally think about me? Like, I kind of have to know, like, just tell me. He's like, well, before I wrote this paper on I'm calling Death by 1,000 Cuts. Actually, I wrote 2 papers, one with 1 T and then one with 2 T's, referring to Matt Cutts, who's an engineer inside of Google. And like, I specifically showed how it compromised that one human being. I'm like, here's a human being inside Google. You trust Google. This is important to you that your information's safe. I will show you how I'd hack this one individual. Specifically, is a very well-known person inside Google. In fact, he might have been the most well-known person other than like Larry Page and Sergey Brin and whatever. So he's like, before that paper was written, no one knew who you were. It was just the security team. Like, we knew who you were, but no one else. And now everyone knows who you are. And it's pretty, like, the way the marketing team and PR team, they're pretty convinced that you could hack us anytime you want. I'm like, great. I'm glad we're on the same page. Because I finally felt like we were having a real conversation. Like, that's the state of the art is Google, and they are terrible.
Wow.
And they knew it, finally. It took a while, but they finally figured it out.
So, all right. So as a public persona then, it sounds like I would encapsulate that argument as sometimes you got to break a few eggs to make an omelet, right?
Yeah, that would have been a faster way to say it. But I think the example was useful.
It was extremely useful. And so let me ask you this, in that, once you took that stance, did you feel like you had a better platform to do the good that you wanted to do?
Absolutely. Oh, 100%. Like I said, in fact, I even tried to do it the really responsible way. I just find a bunch of vulnerabilities and I'd call people, and I literally, people would get very upset with me. Like, oh my God, like, what are you doing? Like, you're ambulance chasing, you're trying to do this stuff. And I'm like, okay, well, there's the other option too. Fine. I don't care. Whatever. If you don't want to do it the easy way, there's a much more gross way I can do this. And I don't care if you don't become a customer, because I don't want to work with you anyway. You're terrible. And then I kind of moved away from that idea entirely. I'm like, look, that's just not a good way to get customers. It's not a healthy way to do it for me, for them. They don't trust me after that anyway. So screw it. I'm just going to keep publishing this. And I ran a consultancy at the time. I was kind of a bad person, by the way. I mean, I was, in the sense that I was willing to crack as many eggs as it took. And I was not careful, was not cautious with the way I was going about certain things. And I actually deeply regret it in some ways, but not that specific part. I really wanted to make a point, because it seemed like the whole industry was very happy being very insecure. Like, great, let's just be insecure, and we'll just go about things, and we'll quietly fix vulnerabilities, and just move, or not. It doesn't really matter. And I'm like, this is totally unacceptable. Like, people I care about use these applications, and they're fragile, and there's only a very few handful of people who understand how fragile. And it doesn't take much for one of them to weaponize what they know and turn it at broad scale and start taking out all kinds of stuff. Yeah. And so I felt vindicated in the end. And in Google's case, it was a massive controversy. It was a really big pain in the ass. It actually made me end up shutting down the blog eventually. But the good news of that is they created something called Project Zero. So now they reach out to engineers. They reach out to, like, let's say they find an exploit in Microsoft. They'll contact Microsoft and give them a full month to figure out what's going on and how to deal with it and whatever. And they're much better about communicating with the security industry. But back when I was doing it, it was garbage. It was terrible. And so I got the worst of the backstabbing and terrible stuff that they did. To your point, I needed everyone to take it extremely seriously. Like, this guy is not someone you're going to want to mess around with, because he will make an even bigger point next time. Like we have, there's like baby steps, and we've already crossed over into like territory where this guy's going to be a real pain in the ass. And it was useful. I was able to force the conversation, and now we're way, way safer for it. Everyone's safer for it.
Well, it's kind of interesting. Nassim Taleb made an interesting point about this. He said that if on September 10th, 2001, congressional legislation went into effect that reinforce the cockpit doors of every plane, then probably at the next session, those people who passed the legislation would have been voted out of office, because everyone would have said, this is pointless. How stupid is this? Right? Because we would never have seen 9/11. And to some extent, what I hear you saying is, you did this thing and you embarrassed these people. You posted this thing and everybody, aired their dirty laundry for everybody to do, and they forced them to deal with it. But, had you not done that and they just kept trundling along, a disaster of 10 times the proportion or hundreds of times the proportion could have befallen them.
Absolutely.
And you're the guy who reinforced the cockpit door, right? Mm-hmm. And so whether they like it or not, we'll never know like just exactly what that vulnerability could have meant, but it could have been epic.
Could have.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember I had this interesting conversation. I was in the Santa Fe at the Santa Fe Institute at some very weird conference that I feel like was probably funded by the military or something. I don't know what it was. No one was very clear on where's the money coming from for this thing, but they kind of shoved, I don't know, maybe 12 of us or something in a room. It was like me and somebody from Google, an evolutionary biologist, and some physicist or something.
It sounds like a start of a bad joke.
Yeah, I know, right? It's very weird. But anyway, one of the guys was the Secret Service, and we're walking around. They have a really beautiful property there. It's absolutely stunning. And we're just kind of walking around, shooting the shit. I didn't really know him. He didn't really know me. So we're just like, oh, what do you do? We're all strangers, really. And I told him what I'd done. He's like, wait a minute, I know you. I'm like, how? And that doesn't sound good. And he's like, because he's Secret Service, right? He's like, no, I'm on the board of some company. He told me what the company was. I'm going to leave that name out for a second. But, or probably just leave it out. But anyway, he's like, yeah, you found some vulnerability in this company, and then they tried to fix it, and then the way they fixed it was really stupid, and then you changed something, and it like re-broke it. And I'm like, oh, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yes. So what happened is they had this thing, and then they basically said, anytime you enter the word script, we'll just remove the word script. So I put SC and then script and then ripped, and then so they removed script and it became script again. So it was very easy to get around it. And so they looked really bad, like really, really, really bad when this happened. And they tried to put me in jail. And so they were like reaching out to this guy, because the Secret Service, like, can you put this guy in jail?
Wow.
And I'm like, and so thankfully he's like, I don't think he's done anything worthy of putting him in jail. Like, why don't you just fix it?
Why didn't you guys just shoot the messenger?
Yeah. Why don't you just fix this issue? And so they ended up, that's the path they went because of him. But like, that's how perilously close I was getting to the line. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And, but I still feel, in the end, after it was all said and done, regardless of how bad it was for me, because I think there was a lot of downside to doing that way. I still think it was the right thing to do. And so that would have been my guiding light. It's like, I care way more about people's moms and grandmothers and cousins and whatever who know nothing about security, who know nothing about how to navigate complex web flows, who know nothing about what phishing emails are or any of this stuff that security people take for granted. And if I don't think that your product is going to protect them, I'm coming for you. And that's how I operated for years, many years. The guiding light, I would guess,
Yeah. But I mean, the justification that I see for that is you came from a place of caring, not from a place of, enriching yourself off of their vulnerabilities and these people. And,
I did get,
well, yeah, I mean, you obviously provided the cure to their illness, right? But you just illuminating the illness for them that they had it is not giving it to them. You didn't install these defects in their stuff. And so to me, I look at that and say, hey, you took a stand, right? You care about, you have a core value there, which is everybody should be safe and nobody should be negligent and these things. And, that's a core value that has a little bit of an edge to it because you took it to a point where it was extreme. Yes, you could have done things behind the scenes, but you did it in a public facing manner. People could argue that you were doing that for self-aggrandizement, but also...
And truthfully, there was some of that.
Sure.
I was not a great person back then.
But also, there was plenty of people that are doing the same thing you were doing in the dark and that they don't know about, and they sure as hell weren't telling anybody when they did it. So
I just want to be careful not to get myself off the hook too easily.
Yeah.
I know what my mind was at the time, and I know there were truly altruistic reasons for doing most of what I was doing. However, I also was profiting off of it, and I was also aware of that, and I was also pushing a lot of buttons to make that occur.
Yeah. I mean, you were definitely an edgy person when you did this, right?
Absolutely.
And yes,
to
and
say the least.
yeah, and being an edgy person for your own benefit is certainly not a crime,
Right.
as you found out.
Sure.
It is not a crime.
Apparently not.
It's close to being a crime, apparently, but it's not a crime. So
that is not the only time I almost end up in jail, by the way. But that I know of at least twice, at least in the United States. Many other places more times. But I think what I wanted to kind of get to in this is that the attitudes of, in this case, me, but it doesn't have to, we don't have to talk about me anymore. I was just as an example, the attitudes of the persona become, if they're good anyway, or at least if they're sticky. I don't know if good in the virtuous sense of good. I mean more like
clear. I mean like
enjoyable,
okay.
Whether they're good enjoyable or bad enjoyable. You know, you can have a bad act, you can have a protagonist or an antagonist, and both can be enjoyable. You know what I mean? So I don't mean good in a virtuous sense. I mean enjoyable. If the message is enjoyable and consumable and interesting, it becomes contagious. It actually sticks with the people, and they actually follow it through the marketing process. That's kind of what I really was trying to get to by that whole, I know it's a weird, long way to get there, but how do you make your external persona as a corporate entity especially be one of those things? It's extremely sticky and interesting, and doesn't have to be good, I don't think. It could be a very edgy brand, but enough that you're going to remember it and go back to it.
Well, I mean, there's certainly some good fundamental tricks of the trade. And one of the things that I think I've found to be just absolutely hilarious is the rise of reality TV shows. Because, I mean, they will make a reality TV show out of anything, right?
You can blame Krista Beck for that.
Yeah, I mean, but the fact is people are watching it, right? And now why are people watching a reality TV show about fill in the blank? Like that would be totally boring and lame, and I would never have thought that it would be interesting, but people are watching it. And it's because there's story, right? There's a story with characters, and it's entertaining to watch, and people bond emotionally to the characters, and then they become invested, and then they can't stop watching it. And so they sit there and they watch it. I don't personally do that, but I've certainly known plenty of people that do, and I don't judge them for it.
A little.
Just a little. Okay, maybe I judge them a little. Sorry. Thank you for keeping me honest. I admit that. Okay. But
you said it kind of in a judgy way.
I did. All right. Thank you for calling me out. All right. See, there's your BS meter just going right off. But okay, so now you've got any kind of brand, right? You've got customers. You've always got a story. There's always a story there. Whatever it is that you're doing, you have a story. I mean, case in point, I spent most of my teenage years working summers, nights, weekends in a bolt factory. And I'm talking not like something, oh, you must mean like something high tech. No, I'm talking about fasteners, man. I'm talking about nut and bolt screwing together. And it was awesome. I loved working there. I thought it was the most meaningful and interesting job I ever had at that time. And it was because I felt like here is a bunch of rapid tension bolts that I'm building, and these are going to be a bridge somewhere. And there's going to be semis that run over these things, and like they're going to, and I understand how the metal works and the metallurgy on this, and everything's going to be safe because we took the time to make these bolts right, and they're awesome. And I would be very proud of that. And then the next day I'd be making, I swear to God, like steering columns for Ford trucks. And then I would meet, we'd have a problem with the wrist pins that were like the pins that would go up and down in the engines for Chrysler. And every single one of those things had a story to me. And I was riveted. Get the pun? Yeah. See what I did there? Every day I took tremendous pride coming out of there and just watching that place and thinking, this was a great day. This was a really good way to spend my time, and I learned so much. So the other thing I learned then, I was able to take a step back and realize I'm excited about a bolt factory. I'm excited about what I do making bolts. And if you can be excited about that, then I just believe that anything has a story to tell. And with the right message and the right story, you can engage your customers.
Okay, well let's do one.
All right,
we got these cups. Let's say I think this is Discount Mugs, if memory serves. Discountmugs.com. I am not an affiliate or anything.
Buy Discount Mugs.
but I think that's where I got them. They're, by the way, chosen because of the shape. That's why we ended up with these. But anyway, if you're trying to come up with a story for Discount Mugs kind of out of nowhere, because maybe they just needed to, have some money because they were out of a job, how do you come up with a compelling story for them?
All right. Well, let's talk about the founders of Discount Mugs,
okay.
right?
All right.
So who were the founders of Discount Mugs?
Yeah, you got me.
I mean, I'm imagining it was a person who, what do they call it when you like sculpt the clay and like,
yes. Potter.
Yes. So it was a frustrated potterer, right? And I would obviously want to tell the real story, but
sure.
Let's start with the story, right?
Sure.
A potterer who just really dreamed that like there could be something better and that you could put your own name on it, because as you can see, you've got your name on your mugs here.
Yeah.
And she, let's make it a she, could never get that off the ground, right? She tried and failed. And then it was only when she realized that it wasn't just about her mug, but it was about what you could put on it and that you could have your own piece of it. And this is really your mug, your story, that it became interesting. And that's when on her third attempt, she succeeded and created Discount Mugs.
So I would have thought you would go a different path because of the name. Because it's like, oh, there's all these other mugs, right? There's like 50,000 mug types and whatever. You can get them from all kinds of places. Yes. But what you really want is a high quality mug at a discounted price, and you want it fast. You don't want to wait, 20 weeks or whatever, and you don't want to be, is it going to be good quality? Is it going to come broken? You want it shipped to your door. You want it to be high quality. Jeez, I really should pay me for this.
Yeah, you should get an affiliate.
But my point being, like, I think it's in the name. I think their branding, they just shoved it right in the name, which is kind of a cool thing. Like it's easy to remember. It's clear and concise. It's short.
Yeah.
Whenever
I'm working with a low cost leader, I try to take the tack of making the customer feel that they should be indignant about paying a higher price for something, that really like they were getting tricked by the other competitors. And so maybe, we add to the story that it's called Discount Mugs because she realized that if you just want a mug, they're so cheap and easy to produce that like, it's just an outrage that customers would have to pay these outrageous prices for something that hardly costs anything to make. Mm-hmm. So she's offering them.
That was like Dollar Shave Club. That was their model. It's like, why would you buy a $5 razor or whatever, a $20 razor? You can get a $1 razor.
Be just fine. Yeah. And they made the customer feel outraged that they were paying so much for the advanced shave tech. Yeah. Right. I remember those ads. Those were really great.
They were very smart, smart ads. And I think they made a killing as well.
$1 billion sale to Unilever.
Is that right?
Yes.
I didn't catch the end of that story. Wow.
Yeah. Nice job.
Wow.
That guy made that ad, or at least some first version of it, like sitting around the warehouse in the first 30 days. And I think he wound up with that. It was surplus inventory that he wound up with. And I think he had been owed a debt. So this is like the real story. Like, I'm not making this up, or at least I don't think I am, but I think he was owed a debt and they couldn't pay him. And he said, well, I'll just take whatever you have in the warehouse. And they had a bunch of razors and stuff. And he was like, what am I going to do with this? And then he figured out how to sell them. And then he made that goofy ad that everybody loves. I love that ad too. Then and then he just turned into a subscription business, and then, the world loves a subscription business, and away he went.
Yeah.
$1 billion later, ta-da.
Wow. What a great story.
I think I think at least 70% of that is true.
I hope 100% of it's true. I love those little kind of weird, quirky, kind of come out of nowhere, but it was in the name, Dollar Shave Club. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, not $5 Shave Club, not $20 Shave Club. It's Dollar Shave Club. And you know exactly what you're going to get. There's no frills. Most men, anyway, don't really need the frills. In fact, there's something kind of aesthetic about no frills. It's like,
Right.
yeah, I'm a man. I don't need frills.
See, know your niche.
Yeah,
there
exactly,
you go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was very clever. There's another one that recently came out. It was like his and hers chocolate bars. The men had nuts in them, and the women did. So it was. I can't remember exactly the whole story or whatever, but it's like if you can't tell which is which, it's your problem or whatever. But it's like obvious the men have the nuts in it. It was like a very out there kind of campaign. And I actually know people who bought that. I'm like, you actually bought that? That's really funny. Like, how is it? I'm like, it's chocolate.
It's just a chocolate bar. Yeah,
it's a chocolate bar. But it worked, right? The ad worked.
Story.
Yeah, it was a story.
Yeah,
it was a funny story.
Yeah, humor, power of story. Those things always are effective tactics.
Yeah, especially top of the funnel. All right. So I've been joking about the About Us page, but I think with regard to the story, I find myself clicking on the About page extremely often. Like I want to know who the people are. I want to see their faces. I don't know why. I have no idea why I want to see their faces, but I want to see their faces. I want to make sure they're real human beings. If there's no faces, I probably won't do business with them. I just don't know is this even a real person? Is this front for something? Like if you don't have some photos on there, I'm probably not going to, at least not going to trust you at minimum, right? Take extra precautions. But also, if there's no story there at all, where does this company come from, or like why did you build this thing? I'm always a little kind of, I don't know. I just don't trust them as much, because if there is no foundation, if there's no kind of here's why we built this stupid company, it might be a dumb thing, but or it might be incredibly important. Like there is no About Us page on a lot of very large mega companies, but there really should be. It's like, where did this thing come from? Like, tell me the history of how this thing all came to be. And
sure.
It could be a kind of a stupid story, but it's still a story. I'm reading this book I was just telling you about. And I'm not a great reader. I'm a little dyslexic. So I kind of skim read. I don't know how to phrase it exactly. I wouldn't call it speed reading, because it's probably normal speed for normal people, but for me, it's fast. But as soon as I hit a story in the middle of it, I have to, I'm like, whoa, brakes fully on. I need to read every word now, because every word matters in a story, where it doesn't really matter when you're talking about high level, processing how to think about this problem or whatever.
Right.
So how do I make a compelling About Us? How do I make the site, how to sing from a story perspective?
Well, authenticity, I think, helps there a lot. But, there some people can tell a story, some people can't, right? And I think that we find stories everywhere, and they can really add a lot of power to things. So, for example, do you know what the #1 best-selling business book of all time is? I mean, by a factor of an order of 10 in magnitude.
I don't know.
Who Moved My Cheese? Just a silly little story about rats in a maze and moving cheese and change management, right? I think the last time I checked, Who Moved My Cheese had outsold the next biggest book by a factor of 10. Do you know what the second book and now I'm going to stray a little bit over my skis. I'm going to have to check these facts later.
Sure.
But I'm pretty sure that at least for a long time, the #2 book was The Goal, which is a book about supply chain operation, but it's a fictional story that is sold to almost every business school now. And it goes through the story of this, failed plant and how this guy turns it around, and it's all story, right? These are the two biggest business books. And I think one of the struggles that I've been wanting to write a book about customer experience, but I started on a book and it was extremely dry. It did not have story. And I just backed off the project. And then I kind of came up with one that does have customer experience in it. It starts with a guy getting canceled. His CEO gets canceled of a company, and then he realizes that he just has ignored customer experience and needs to start to take hold of it. And so the story goes on from there. So I'm working on that right now, and I believe that is going to work precisely for the reason you mentioned. And that is, when it's all just dry process, I think I don't know if I do the same thing you do, but I skim through it. And a lot of times I feel like if I just read the table of contents of most business books, and this is not a knock to the book, I pretty much have the gist of what the book's about, right? I can pretty much get the 10 principles, because chapter 1's principle 1, and on we go, right? Yeah. So I can get the 10 things of the 10 things that we need to do.
Right.
but story brings it home in a way that that means that I'm going to apply it, because I just believe that when I hear the story, then I can relate to it more. It doesn't just kind of go in one ear out the other, or just become kind of part of my memory, but it connects to me in a lot more fundamental ways that I relate unconsciously as I'm listening to it. And I think that's what really drives it home and brings the message home.
And so back to Yoast for a second, this is where the avatars become extremely interesting, because no one really knows Yoast. I mean, he's got some friends, you know, I would consider myself one of his friends. But the vast majority of people who know who Yoast are, they've never met him. They don't even know, they probably couldn't pick him out of a crowd. They really wouldn't know him unless he said who he was. But they know his persona. They know his archetype. They know what he's trying to get across. They know the product really well. They're passionate about it. And so he hasn't had to put his actual face there. It's just a caricature, but it's a caricature that looks approximately sort of vaguely kind of like him, whatever. And it went like crazy. I like the idea of being able to extract the principles of the company into a caricature. I don't know that I'm super on board with having an individual because it's too easy to cancel. But if it's, you know, a bunny or something, you know, the Energizer bunny as an example, like you can't cancel the bunny, you know, like it's just a bunny. It's a toy bunny, right? But it's memorable. It's one of those things like you see it and you're like immediately you know, oh, that's the Energizer bunny.
But here's the difference. I think that when you have the Energizer bunny on the About Me page, there's no trust, right?
True.
Like it's entertaining, it's engaging, but it doesn't bring the trust. When it's
unless you weave it into and then we came up with the story because we thought it was easier to understand and you kind of explain the origins of the Energizer bunny.
That's not so bad. I can get behind that.
Right, because one thing I've seen, not very many, but some companies will do a timeline of what happened in there. Like, you're going to remember the Energizer bunny. This is the Energizer bunny commercial, and you kind of mouse over it, or maybe it's a narrative or whatever, and you kind of like, that's so cool. That's when they came up with this thing, or that's when we invented new like lithium ion type batteries, or you know, I have no idea what I'm talking about here, but you get my drift. Like a more narrative style, like, this board members have all gotten replaced. Now we have this new board, blah, 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 blah. This is a big shakeup in the company. And you're like, wow, there's this drama. That's neat. I didn't know anything about that.
Yeah.
And you can kind of learn about the inside of the company without being dry.
Yeah. And I mean, that happened to me. When I was 19 years old, I was in a computer science class and I was way behind on an assignment, and I pulled an all-nighter, and I just remember I was taking no-dose. We didn't have Red Bull back then, so I was taking no-dose. I took these no-dose pills, and I stayed up all throughout the night. It's 8 o'clock the next morning. I caught myself back up, right? I am walking onto the science center, and my teaching assistant is walking in, and she says to me, like, hey, do you want to see Larry Ellison? And I was 19. I just said, who the hell is Larry Ellison? You know? And she said, come on, you're going to want to see this. And so we went over to the Science Center B room, and sure enough, there's Larry Ellison, and he gets up on stage and starts railing about Windows 95 and Microsoft. And his talk was called The Network is the Computer. And he just went on to kind of describe like an early idea of the cloud and like how things would be in the cloud. And you'd have like the simple terminal and on and on and on. And it kind of energized me. And it was really cool that, that happened in the late 90s. And I started my company in the early 2000s. And by the mid 2000s, I had this opportunity to be an Oracle partner. And it was just kind of a fun, came 360. And I was like, oh, that guy who was just
so you could
smoking
easily work this all into a narrative. And I would know way more about you and why the company exists and your background. And it's really the same story.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, oh, we do this Oracle stuff. Like, yeah, but where did that come from? Like, what's the I don't know. I personally, I spend a lot of time, probably more time on the About Us page than nearly any other page, because you go to the marketing slicks and it's like, someone has a diagram of something they invented.
Architecture.
It's like none of this actually means anything, and you're trying to interpret what it's like. It's like, I kind of want to know, like, are these people real? Is this a real company? It's like, oh, they got some really great people. Oh, I actually recognize some of these people, or I recognize some of their accomplishments, even if they don't know them. And this is a real team. This is a real thing. They're serious people. This isn't, something they just threw up. So I think it's probably worth talking about AI, because so first of all, there's going to be a new billions and billions of AI chatbots all interacting with people, and they don't have brand voice. They don't really know anything about the company. They're programmed, via OpenAI. Maybe they have, a list of questions that they're programmed to answer or something, but they don't really know anything about the company. They don't know anything, period, really. How do you start reining that in, or how do you think about it in the future, where you got to know something about the brand. You got to have the brand voice. You got to have, some way of thinking about things and thinking, putting a lot of weight on that word, but I think you know what I mean when I say it. Thinking about the right way to respond to certain types of probes that might come from the press, let's say, or come from an analyst, let's say, or come from a potential partner, let's say, where you really can't just throw an answer out there. You have to be more calculating and careful with your answers. Like how do you see that going?
I think this is going, whatever I say next, I'm pretty sure that in a year we're going to laugh about it. Okay. And I'm pretty sure in 5 years we won't even be able to listen to it, because it'll be like, oh God, we were so wrong about this.
Maybe.
So I start there. Yeah. I mean, to me, we're in the spot with AI that we were with like web browsers in the mid 90s, right? Where it's like, we all laugh and, joke about Netscape Navigator, and downloading an image. I remember the first time I saw an actual image, and I feel like that's where we are with AI right now. It is just getting started. It is super crude. It is hilariously bad. It has hallucinations. It's like, but all that's going to get fixed. And I think it's going to get fixed fast. So, you say, well, maybe AI wouldn't be able to bring a nuanced answer in a story. I actually think it will. I think it will, and it will do that pretty quickly. But only if we, of course, train it, because it's only going to be as smart as what we train it on, right? So the key with AI, to me, the only one that I can possibly say with any kind of hope at being forecasting correctly is, if we train it, it's going to respond, right? It's that simple. And whatever we train it on, it will do something, I think, very intelligent with that. So, to the Bud Light example we were talking about earlier, you train it on the wrong things, it's going to make pretty egregious mistakes, right? I think it would do something, just as bad. Train it on the right things, and it's going to come up. But to the extent that it has the ability to self-learn and to connect with the environment, which is kind of a scary thing to think about, but if it can, and it can get its own feedback loop, it'll figure things out pretty fast. Mm-hmm. In fact, it might be laughing at us right
now. In the future?
In the future.
Yeah. Goes back and reviews this like,
yeah,
idiots.
They had no clue.
So this guy named Jake Moffat, he had a lawsuit against Air Canada because Air Canada had an AI chatbot that basically said, yeah, you can go ahead and get a refund. You just book this thing and you get a refund later or whatever. So he booked the thing. He didn't get the refund. He's like, okay, why not? Your system said I could get a refund. And they're like, well, no, that's AI. And he's like, no, your company,
you're responsible.
You told me this thing. And so when I heard that story, I'm like, wow, we're in for a really weird, slippery thing, because what if it told me something completely random? Like, I own the airline now, Yeah. I'm fairly sure I could get it to do that. Where's the limits exactly? It's like, well, you shouldn't have any reasonable expectation that this thing is going to, have some sort of contract with you. And yet it did in some very specific way. So is anything coming out of an AI now valid? Is the voice now valid? If it's racist or sexist or whatever, is that the stance of the company? Because that is the company. Like, where do we go?
Well, okay, so there's two ways to answer that, right? Sure. One way is like, the strict interpretation of, if it's their AI chatbot, then anything it says or does, they're responsible for, right? I mean, there's just no other way. Per your earlier things about maybe you create a new website, you can post all the things that people, that their AI bots say, and you can just bust them for it. Yeah. So maybe it's too soon. Sorry.
It's going to happen. Matter of time.
So, but on the other hand, yes, of course, there's the common sense half of that as well, right? And so, and then there's things in between, like this person who thought they could get a refund because that would be the policy. That it's pretty much right in that gray zone of like, no, that's you got to be responsible and you got to take action for it. But if it says something like, yeah, you can own the company, I think we can all be reasonable that like those kinds of things are a little ridiculous. So
I mean, yes. But then where is the line? So clearly, I think you and I both agree they're not going to just hand over the company. It's just here's the keys, kid. And also they have to honor any agreement that they've made with the customer. Where exactly is that line? I actually cannot mentally wrap my head around how they're going to write that law.
Well,
what's the case law going to look like?
So I don't know. That's way over my skis. But I think that the way that I've been thinking about how to handle service with AI bots is to give the AI bots, just a restricted set of capabilities, right? And so whatever, regardless of what the bot says, just like, I mean, you could have a crazy person working in your call center, right? And if a crazy person's working in the call center and says something inappropriate to the customer, there's a limit to how much, you have to, of course, accept responsibility for the horrible thing that they said or did. But then after that, you can, there's a limit. I'm pretty sure we're going to find the same thing to be true with when we just make it artificial intelligence. So there'll be things that it is capable of doing. Like maybe we should just say, like, instead of letting the AI chatbot tell you have a refund, either it processes the refund or not. And we debug the heck out of like whether it is processing refunds accurately or not.
You're bringing up a very good point. So I really don't know the limits if somebody inside the company says, absolutely, we'll do blah, 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 sign my name on it, like I might be a lowly call center person, but I've signed it, hand it over to you. Obviously I don't own the company now, I think, but they are acting as a corporate representative. Maybe they're only empowered to do certain things and therefore there's internal processes that protect it. But how do I, as a customer, know what your internal processes are so that I know what the limits of this chatbot, am I allowed to have this conversation with them? Am I not allowed to have it? Or it's like, okay, now you're over my limits. Now you have to go to tier 2 and those guys have more access to, do those kinds of crazy operations that I don't. Or whatever.
I mean, I think the thing that's a little bit scary, but also a really powerful thing for AI to do is to take action, right? So AI, certainly generative AI, we've all played around it with enough and it tells you something. Maybe it's hallucinating, maybe it's accurate, but it's not like then tripping a web service to go make something happen. Like you couldn't just tell your chat GPT, like, hey, go book me a ticket to San Francisco next Tuesday. It can't do that. It can tell you what flight to take and do all that, but it can't just use your credit card.
It's like 1 minute away from being able to do that.
Oh yeah. It's 1 minute away from being able to do that. And when it does that, then I think the funny thing is although that sounds scary, I think that actually has a narrower set of things because we could put more guardrails around what can it do and under what circumstances can it do. And of course, then you can add in whatever kind of monitoring you want around that, right? So that you can debug it and get to the point where, it's 5.9 reliable. I think once you do that, it actually makes it a simpler problem because right now we're imagining it as like this unstructured, like it could say anything. And therefore, if it says something, then we're responsible for it. But if it can do things, then, and we only tell it can do a certain number of things, I think we've contained the problem quite a bit more.
As long as they can't enter themselves into contracts, right?
Yeah, right. Just like if it was natural intelligence from a call center employee as opposed to artificial intelligence.
So
right?
I mean, maybe there's just a terms of service thing at the top, or says like this you're talking with an AI chatbot, nothing it says is contractually binding. Blah blah blah. Blah.
Right. Just like how when you watch the director's cut of a movie and they put up the disclaimer, this isn't the studio's opinions, it's just the director. Well, guess what? Same thing with the chatbot.
Right. Yeah, maybe that's the answer.
Yeah.
So one other thing I want to talk to you about is the innovator's dilemma. And have you read that book?
It's been a little while.
Okay.
So tell me which part you want to talk about.
Well, the premise, which is companies will often just stop innovating as soon as they become public, especially because it just turns out it's faster, better, cheaper, easier, although very dangerous to only acquire. Like they won't do any internal innovation at all, or virtually none. But they will acquire. They'll acquire new technologies all day long. Just bring them in. Just some of it's customer acquisition, but most of it's not. Most of it's just like new tech, and then they'll spend all their time integrating. But the result of that is if there's a thing that can be done that would allow them to win against their competitors, and that thing can only be done from within the company or in their competitor's company, they won't do it. So if their competitor is not in the same innovator's dilemma that they are, they will pull the trigger, they'll do the thing, and they'll crush you. That's the, Blockbuster, versus Netflix sort of thing, right?
Right.
Blockbuster easily could have done everything. There's nothing stopping them from building Netflix.
Yep.
I mean, they were huge. They were dominant. They could have crushed it. But Netflix did it. And where's Blockbuster now? Right. I think they literally just have one last store, as a joke almost. Maybe even shut that one down. I don't know. So how does that play into this, sort of, I'm looking at it as like a customer of a product, or, I'm working with a megacorp. It's like, I can't tell if they're ever going to innovate any of the products that I'm buying and researching or whatever. It's like, is this thing stagnant forever? Is this never going to evolve? Is there never an opportunity to see this thing plug into this thing? Because you own both of those things. It's like, well, yeah, unless it's an integration, unless we purchased one of them. If we built it, no, because that's innovation. If we purchased it, yeah, we might integrate it. From the external side, like first of all, how do you process that as a customer? But then from a company perspective, how do you kind of get past the innovator's dilemma and start thinking more about core values? Is there a way to integrate a core value that says, okay, we're not going to only be buying and acquiring. We're going to dedicate some amount of time to true innovation, and we're actually going to empower these people to actually build product.
Well, I can see at least three different ways of looking at this. So looking at it from the customer's point of view is probably the most painless of the three, right? Because you're buying the product today from the big company that's successful, that earned your trust and got here, and then they get soft and, complacent, and they stop doing things that really fit for you, and you just switch. You vote with your feet. And depending on how big the purchase is and the contract, you can, that's that. So I don't really think of that as being true dramatic. The innovator's dilemma is what gives me hope all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm usually working for someone who's an underdog trying to take out the big guy, right?
Yeah.
I love taking out the complacent. And let's face it, there's a part of human nature that's happy and gets complacent and then doesn't want to do any more to move things forward. And the innovator's dilemma basically says, when you get to that point where you're complacent, where you're not going to innovate anymore, where you're going to outsource all of that, you lose, you're done, right? Like, it's just a matter of time. And whether you're a train company who defined themselves as we're a train company and then got displaced by airlines, or whether, you're Blockbuster and you get displaced by Netflix, or, whatever's going to happen to Uber, because I'm sure they're going to get displaced at some point. It happens because you stop innovating, and I think that's just. So I actually...
Taxis to Uber is an easier one.
Taxis to Uber is the one now, yes.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, every single time somebody takes over the world, it's only until they become complacent enough that then their time in the sun is done and somebody else comes on.
Well, that works great, unless I'm trying to work with this megacorp because they have the product and patents and a bunch of other things that make it very difficult to use anybody who's small.
Yeah.
And there's some logic behind that. No one ever gets fired for, using enter big company here.
Big company name. Yeah.
IBM, let's say, or something. Okay, well, I want to use IBM. Are they going to innovate this one thing? Probably not.
No.
Probably never. Even if I can see it, even if it's like the blinding sun obvious thing they should totally do, they're not going to do it.
No.
Not ever.
Not ever. And, we live in an interesting time because that happens, and certainly true when you become a publicly traded company and you have to answer to the investors every 90 days. It's also true to some extent for everybody who's in large private equity, because they have a time clock as well. And it's not as short as the public markets, but it's short. It's 3 years or 5 years, and they can't think any further beyond that because they just won't exist if they do. But what I love about all of that is that it does open up opportunity for new people. And I just love the social justice of that, you know, if you've got a great idea, if you are an innovator, then even if you don't have as much capital as the other guy, even if you don't have as much access to talent, you can win, you know, and that's always there. And it's almost like an inherent dynamic that if you somehow fixed the innovator's dilemma, that would go away. And so I actually don't want to solve the innovator's dilemma.
Having spent a little bit of time inside of a publicly traded company several times now, it's pretty awful. You know, I'm an innovative person. I like to push the buttons and like make things happen. And oh, look, this thing and this thing go together. It'd be great. And I am just an unwelcome force. Please get the hell out.
You're in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think for a lot of people, there's.
But that means that other people like me are also not in there.
No.
And that means that guys like me who are pushing the envelope are just going to absolutely crush those big companies eventually.
What's wrong with that?
Well, the thing that's wrong with it is I'm not saying that small companies winning is bad, but I am saying that if you want to hang your hat on anybody and build like really complex infrastructure that's going to last, you know, I don't know, hopefully like 20 years maybe or 10 years, you can't rely on any of the big companies. You just can't, because you have no idea if they're going to get displaced because the small guy comes along, looks at this very obvious massive hole that you could drive a truck through and says, yeah, I could make this thing in no time. And then, you know, all of a sudden the entire industry is shifting.
Yeah.
It makes it very difficult to future-proof technology.
Yeah. And I think that, you know, to use another buzzword though, that's the creative destruction that is kind of fun and keeps things interesting.
That is true. But I'm always trying to like make things truly resilient, and it is so difficult.
I mean, if you want resilient, you can go back to the 19th century and Standard Oil. They were resilient. They were innovative. They were there, right? They had it all. And they got broken up, right? Because then we had stagnation, and that's also is not good. Mm-hmm. But interestingly enough, the thing that always amazes me about Standard Oil is that the day they broke it up, they made the investors so much money because it was so much more valuable as a bunch of small pieces.
Of course. Well, so did you want to talk about the Austin EO thing?
Yeah.
While I have you here, I'd never heard of it until I saw it.
Oh man. So. Yeah. The Austin EO thing is awesome.
Yeah.
So, you know, here's the idea is that it is a worldwide global organization called Entrepreneurs Organization. It is organized globally into 232 chapters in 7 regions around the world. Mm-hmm. So there's a chapter here in Austin, but there's a chapter in just about every major U.S. city as well as worldwide. And inside the chapter, we run as an autonomous unit. So the 232 entrepreneurs that are members of EO Austin are an autonomous unit of the global organization. And so we do all kinds of really cool things. And our mission is very clear, which is unlock the potential of every entrepreneur. And to qualify for EO, you've got to have a business making at least $1 million in revenue, or you have to have, you know, raised a certain amount in venture capital. I think it's at least 5 million, but don't quote me on that. And the goal is that they exist to make you better. And that might mean for some entrepreneurs that they just don't have the business skills to get from 1 million to 10 million or beyond. And we've got all kinds of great things that we can do there. But for a lot of other entrepreneurs, they have the business skills, but they don't have the emotional or the leadership skills, or maybe their home life is a mess. And we have programs for that too. We have confidential forums that meet with where it's absolutely secret what's discussed, but anything that's getting in the way of the entrepreneur, they can discuss with a group that is not going to judge them, is not going to give them advice, but instead is going to listen to what they have to say and share experiences of anything that might resonate with them. And as a result, I have seen that for myself personally, I have been able to clear the biggest emotional hangups and find out that really most of the time that I've had a business problem, I didn't have a business problem. I actually had a me problem. And I was able to clear that obstacle out of my way, transform and reinvent myself and push that envelope and go further, faster. So Entrepreneurs Organization is incredible. It's also really fun. So this year, it's an all volunteer run organization, and I volunteered to be the president this year of the Austin chapter. And wow, what an experience this has been. the global organization has a really well thought out, disciplined process for making sure that people who become presidents are absolutely successful. And I thought I had lots of entrepreneurial skills going into this, but going through their programs, they flew all of us to Cape Town, South Africa for a global leadership conference. And we all went out there and learned a whole bunch of new skills. And then I came back and organized a board full of just another group of amazing, I've got about 20 other volunteer entrepreneurs who also volunteer their time to do other things for the chapter. And so the 232 members are getting a tremendous amount of value from it. But I actually have found that as we give to the organization, I become a better entrepreneur, and I'm making the people around me better. We're all getting a lot better. And and that's been extraordinary.
Can you give me an example of like, so I walk in, I'm making $2 million a year, let's say, in my company, and I'm running into like sales roadblocks or marketing roadblocks or whatever it is. Like, how do you help them out exactly?
Sure. Yeah. So there's a whole slew of programs. So first we have a mentorship program. So if you have want to meet with someone who's done acquisitions in your industry, who's maybe led a sale of a company, whatever it is that you need at your stage, we'll partner you up with a mentor of one of our members or someone who's exited and is no longer members and alumni, so you can get a mentor. So right there, we're going to help you with a bunch of the things. We have classes that we do, 4 classes a year on strategy, people, sales, and strategy, people, sales, and operations. And you can go through and you can learn those. We're just doing those constantly all around the time. We also have lots and lots of ad hoc learning experiences that we do either with UT McCombs or we'll bring in other people. Like today we brought in the HomeAway guys to really tell us and do an HBS case study on pricing and what happened to pricing at HomeAway in 2014 when they had a big moment and had to decide how they were going to address the concerns with Airbnb. Mm-hmm. So we do great stuff like that. We also do all kinds of fun learning events as well. So, but those wouldn't be, the fun events wouldn't be relevant to the question you asked. But sure. One thing that we're doing is...
maybe.
Well, thing...
Being exposed to other smart people is certainly useful when you're an entrepreneur. Like, oh, how did everyone else do this?
Yeah. Well, one of the things I did is I love Jesse Itzler's book, Living with a Seal. And in the opening chapter of that book, he talks about how he and his friends were doing a 24-hour endurance race around a Walmart parking lot. And I used that as a bit of inspiration. I thought, how cool would it be if we had the whole chapter essentially do that? So we've taken our groups, our forums, and we are doing an event in May where we are essentially, we've rented a space and we're going to be going around a track for 24 hours. And we've asked these really cool group of Navy SEALs to come give us a little bit of a taste of what that mental fortitude and the grit and determination they have, because, as we go around for 24 hours, we're going to see what that's like. And then we're going to raise a bunch of money for charity at the same time. So we're doing that, and that's really exciting. So that's the Iron Forums of Texas that we're doing in May. And so that's just kind of like an off the wall thing that we're doing that is kind of exciting and fun. So we do fun stuff like that as well as everything else. And then it builds a community. And then we have support groups for spouses. So whether you're the male spouse of a female entrepreneur or a female spouse or male entrepreneur or anything other combination thereof, we have programs where the spouses can kind of get together and start to work on their own careers. And as well as deal with
what total jerks they're married to.
Yeah, exactly. That too.
Because let's be honest.
Yeah, there's something wrong with all of them. So it's a chanced event, but it's not just a chanced event. That's actually the number one concern they have is they were like, I do not want to sit around and bitch about my spouse. So instead it's a chance to talk about their own careers, how they build something, maybe, because they're getting a little bit outshined by their entrepreneur spouse. How do they deal with that and become an independent person in their own right and do their own thing? Or maybe they're an entrepreneur themselves. So we have different tracks for spouses. So it winds up creating a community. And as a result, it's this really tight knit group of 232 other entrepreneurs and their spouses that I can go to and we can have, really great networking opportunities as well as just understand, how we can help each other out. And the other thing is we have a non-solicitation clause. So nobody is soliciting anything about any of their businesses or charities that they like, nothing. There's none of that goes on as well. So it's really a great, relaxed organization.
But is there biz dev going on? Are people like, hey, I got this thing, and like, oh, wow, that'd be great. I could or I can introduce you to my so-and-so.
Yes, you can definitely unprompted, do that. Or like, for example, I met this really great woman at a conference, an EO conference, and she was into solar, and I was in the market to get solar panels. And I told her, I said, hey, I want to waive my non-solicitation clause. I want you to give me the pitch. Like, what do you got in solar? I want to hear it. And she was wonderful. And then I hired her to put all the solar panels on my house.
Oh, that's great. So so there is a path to saying, opt out. You can pitch me anything you want.
Yes. Yeah. I'll waive my right. Go ahead. But otherwise you can go.
Is that like on a badge? Like I get to see.
No, it's just, one-on-one. So it's really informal, because otherwise we don't want, look, everybody's got a business and everybody's got a cause that they care about. We don't need everybody soliciting everybody else. So it just is really simple. And it's not like we hang you from your thumbnails if you do it, but we ask you not to do it. And most people respect that.
I generally like to hear the pitch, but I want to be told, okay, here's the pitch.
Yeah.
Ahead of time.
Yeah.
Just like,
exactly.
Okay. All right. We're friends. Okay. This is where the pitch begins. All right. And now it's over. We're back to being friends. What do you think of the pitch? And like, okay, yeah, here's where you did like, I didn't like these things. And then, I might actually know somebody. I should get you in touch with so-and-so. I think they'd love it or whatever.
100%.
Or maybe I'm in the market for it or whatever.
Yeah.
That's cool. So how do people get involved in that?
So we have a program for people who haven't made it to $1 million yet called Accelerator. And it's a way to help them. The whole purpose is get from 250,000 or above up over the $1 million target. And so we have a program for that. That's our Accelerator program. And they can join on our EO website. So eoaustin.com. Mm-hmm. The other way to come in is if you are over $1 million, and actually we have there's a footnote that I won't go into. You have to spend a year in the Accelerator program unless you're at 2 million. And that's only on Austin. In other chapters, it's just $1 million. But in Austin, if you're over 2 million, then you can just apply and join up. And, we have core values that I think are, pretty meaningful for what we do in EO, but you can really tell the difference between people who've been an entrepreneur's organization in terms of their attitude, stance, and their cause and belief. And just, it's really easy to do business with other EO people and like other markets. Or if you serendipitously meet somebody and it turns out you're both in EO, you can usually tell even before they've told you.
That's the gang sign.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Gotcha. All right. Well, how about you tell us how to get in touch with you and Motiv and all that stuff?
Yeah. So I am just about to release my website at davidgewing.com. That is going up in the next 2 weeks, hopefully, knock on wood. And so that's where I'm going to have all of my information about my thoughts on leadership, my daily blogs, all my different ideas on what to do with sales, marketing, and service. So I'm really excited about that. I'm also on LinkedIn. So
spell the URL just for the people listening.
Sure. It's David G. My middle name's Gardner, but if you tell anybody, I'll kill you. David G. Okay. Ewing, E-W-I-N-G.
Watching anyway.
.com. So davidgewing.com is my personal website. And then, my LinkedIn is LinkedIn/David G. Ewing. And then Motiv is at Motiv CX, the CX standing for customer experience. So motivcx.com. And you can get to that from my site as well.
All right, David. This has been awesome, man.
Appreciate it. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah. You have a good one.
All right.